And go to you, Common Clerk, for the first item, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item is 2.1 on your agenda, and it is for the minutes of November the 9th.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a Deputy Mayor's move? Councillor Merrithew has seconded those. Thank you. And on the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Okay, not seeing or hearing anyone. Motion's carried. Next item.
Next item is 2.2 on your agenda, and that is for minutes of December the 14th.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Deputy again and seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On that question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. The motion is carried. Thank you. Next item.
Next item, Your Worship, 2.3 on the agenda, and that is for the minutes of January 11th.
Thank you. Moved by the Deputy again, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. Thought we were going to have a stalemate there. We've come to a grinding halt. Okay, thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. The motion's carried. Next item.
Next item is the approval of the agenda, and there are two additions from Committee of the Whole. The first addition is 17.1, and that would be with respect to Fundy Key Option Agreement Amendment. And the next addition is 17.2 with respect to Interim Funding Regional Economic Development Agency of Greater St. John.
Okay, thank you. A motion, Councillor Norton, to approve, seconded by the Deputy. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. The agenda is approved. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is disclosures of conflict of interest, if there are any.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not hearing any voices. So we will say that there's no one declaring a conflict of interest for tonight's meeting. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is the consent agenda.
Okay, so Deputy, you're muted. I think you're trying to move the consent agenda, but we'll just have you unmute so we can hear you.
Move 5.1 to 5.4, inclusive.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the Deputy, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. Questions, comments? Okay. So Councillor Hickey, do you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a brief comment. I just wanted to mention 5.3 is a new lease in the city market being signed at for Slocum and Ferris. I just wanted to do two things. One, thank Dave Forrestal and Sherry Boyd for their service to the city and for their long ownership of Slocum and Ferris and the great job that they did there. And then also just welcome Corey and Joanna to the market. They're two new young entrepreneurs that are really going to breathe some new vision into the market and offer a lot of both good perspective, but pretty exciting some changes to the stall. And I even hear if you're willing to help them renovate, they may even name a sandwich after us, maybe like the Council Club or something. But just wanted to welcome Corey and Joanna to the market.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Your Worship. 5.2, the IBI solution there. I don't really have a question on, well, I do have a question on that. I'll ask Sarah if how that will work if our routing is going to change. So this will be, IBI will come, will provide us with a high quality general transit feed specification. So that will be, go onto the website, it can be a live feed as well. So it'll give us a list of stops, ID, the name, the description, the location, etc., route information, modified service date. So it's going to be exciting and great to have, but I'm just curious as to how that, with the route change, because we'll have to align it obviously with our Stephanie, you're doing the job for that one.
Ms. Rackley Roach, I think
yeah, sorry, Councillor. Yes, to the councillor, when we have decided to go out to do this work that had to be done because we didn't have the skills in-house, part of that engagement is to train our staff so that we can do the changes with future, like make any adjustments with future route changes. So in-house training will have the skill set to do that in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. I've got a question about 5.3, which is the market. I'm just curious about the market space. When I read through the lease, in 2.02 is the use of the common area, and it says that anyone that leases in the market has the use of the common area space at their discretion. So I'm just curious if there's anybody that can answer this question for me. I'm wondering how much space in the market is actually leasable space, and how much space in the market is actually common space. I don't know if anyone pays for the common space or if that's just provided.
Sorry, Andrew. Yeah,
I'm just seeing if Mr. McDonald is on the line here.
Sorry, yes,
Yep.
I'm here. I was just, I'm here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer through your worship. Councillor, yeah, so the common area, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not 100% sure on this, but the way I read it is the common space would be the entrances, exits, the eating area, the solarium, the atrium. So nobody actually technically pays for that space. So the common area would be shared, would mostly be, I would say, really the solarium eating area.
Okay, I just noticed that they have access to it, so it's nice for them. I know that we pay for the common space down at Market Square, which triggered this question for me. All right, thanks so much, Andrew. I just was curious as to how that worked. It might be something we want to look at going down the road, but anyways, that's great for now. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor.
No, that's it for me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I have one actually, and I'm going to ask maybe city manager, and you can reassign it if so. 5.4 tonight in the consent agenda is a clarification of our recreation subsidization or ICE allocation policies. I don't know if all of council got. I did get an email on Friday night. I think in reaction to this item, I responded to the sender saying, please send me your phone number and I'd love to chat with you about it. I did send it to you, city manager. Can you clarify, just maybe for the listening public, what this report is in fact doing tonight?
Your worship, this council approved some time ago an ICE usage rate for all of our arenas to be applied to the various groups, be they youth, adult, et cetera, and it was based in large part on our subsidization policy for the use of ICE. It was always assumed or presumed within the staff that applied for the prime season, if you will, but did not apply in the spring and summer. But our policy did not say that. In the spring and summer, if you will, the typical off-season, if you want to call it that, where the demand on ICE is less, what we have always done when we consider possibilities to use that ICE in spring or summer is we have offered discounted rates. Simply because the demand is not there, but yet we want to continue to provide the service. So all that this report is basically a recognition that in the off season, we will apply other than the standard rates for ICE, which is in actual fact an advantage to those who may apply for ICE in the off season, spring and summer, because the rates will be less than they are during the prime season when ICE demand is much higher.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Tompkins, I see your hand is up. Did we do something wrong already?
No, Your Worship, you did not. I just wanted to bring some clarity to, and I was experiencing technical difficulties while I was trying to raise my hand, to Councillor Reardon's earlier point. Common area in the lease is defined at 1.01F, if you want to have a look, and essentially it's what Mr. McDonald defined earlier.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, Council, on the consent agenda, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, and anyone contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. The motion is carried. Next item, please.
Next item, Your Worship, is 6 members' comments.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just I'll come back for my second comment, but I did just want to, on behalf of council tonight, if we could just wish our condolences to our Premier Higgs, and his extended family. Saddened today to hear of the passing of our Premier's mom, Mrs. Bertha Higgs, who just felt like the whole province celebrated with Mrs. Higgs just recently her 100th birthday. And we just want to send our sincere condolences to the Premier on the loss of what I'm sure was the patriarch of their family. So from all the citizens of St. John to the Premier and his family, we're deeply saddened at the loss of your mom, who recently turned 100 years old. So, okay, I'll come back, but I'll if you want to throw your hands up, council, or whoever would like to go, Councillor Sullivan, kick us off.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, just kind of a cool shout out. I don't know who in staff was responsible for these, but I was a little late getting my compost out this morning when I heard the truck go by in one direction, but not so late that I couldn't run out, get the compost across the street to get it coming back in the other direction. But our garbage trucks have a new mechanism on the side of them, where the driver, as long as I put my compost cart out in the right direction, the driver doesn't have to move. It's a robotic grabbing mechanism that dumps the compost inside the truck. And I just had a brief conversation with the driver, and he seemed quite excited about it. And he spoke to reducing injuries, how it would be easier on his back to be doing the job he does. And, you know, my guess is, thinking back, this must be part of the whole redesign of the system that would have us with a compost cart and a garbage cart, and allow all of that to happen. And I guess, you know, innovations like that, not only does it lead to a healthier and happier workforce, I think it looks to me, as long as citizens point their bins in the right direction faster and easier, it should reduce sick time and all those good things. So just a shout out to the staff who are using it, but certainly to the staff who came up with it. Looks like a very small but cool innovation that'll increase our productivity. And my second point, Your Worship, is simply just a reminder, because it's working. Make sure you're wearing your masks. Make sure you're social distancing. Make sure you're washing your hands and not touching your face. You know, it's interesting to look on social media today as people were celebrating moving from red to orange. You know, we certainly wouldn't have been celebrating moving from yellow to orange. So moving to orange, it's a recognition that in our region we are doing the right things, but we've got a long way to go. We don't want to be in orange. We want to be in yellow, so that we can get some more things open and get that recreation. You know, we had the ice strategy talked about a little bit. We want to open up games for the kids and the adults and all those things. So keep doing the things that we need to do during this pandemic to keep us healthy and keep our neighbors healthy. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Hickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly, I just wanted to mention, always top of mind for me, but was reminded of it quickly this weekend while renovating my new home on Waterloo Street. But as we've been pretty lucky this winter, but as it tends to get colder, there are quite a few homeless folks in our community, and I was able to set a gentleman I had met with in front of my place up in Outflow. And I just wanted to mention the incredible work that organizations like Outflow, like Coverdale do to support folks in our community. You know, the Ward 3 continues to have the highest concentration of poverty. I believe it is still in Canada at 50% of our kids in Ward 3 live in poverty, and it extends well beyond that. I think the number is around mid-30s for the rest of the population. So the incredible work that those organizations do is really significant. And I just wanted to mention that, and please consider supporting them, especially this time of year when the weather gets colder.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Okay, I didn't see any hands, or I can't see anyone there. I just wanted to mention something tonight. I was scrolling through Facebook, and there's a really neat Facebook page called St. John West. And it's there's some really passionate folks who've been posting there. I'm not sure this is going to work. So can everyone see that picture? Okay, so that is this is a picture of a post. I'm going to read it to you from Hugh Britton. Hugh is the dad of Scott Britton, who's a solicitor here with us in the city. This is a photo of my mother, Ruth Britton, who passed away in 2008, just a few days short of her 95th birthday. In 1945, my father passed away from cancer, leaving her with 4 young children, aged 3, 4, 5, and 6. I was 3 years old. She never remarried, and with the help of my grandmother, she was determined to work hard to ensure we had a good upbringing and a good education. She succeeded, having us all graduate from St. John High School, where my father taught, and 3 of us graduating from college and university. Now to get to the story of the badge. No, sorry, Council, let me show you. Can you see? So, sorry, I've got my background on. How do I get there? Can you see the badge? Okay, so she was the first and only police matron of the city of Lancaster. After the city of Lancaster was incorporated in 1953, she became a secretary at City Hall. It was located in the old Fairville School building, and the Lancaster Police had their headquarters there. There were 3 times when a matron was needed to escort a lady to jail or otherwise. The police had to use the services of St. John's matrons. The matron was not always available, and it was costly, as the city had to reimburse St. John. Lancaster, however, had such well-behaved ladies that a full-time matron was not needed. It was suggested that my mother, who was always available right in the building, be sworn in as a matron. The council agreed to pay her a stipend of $300 per year. When we were teenagers, the police car would at times during the evening pull up in front of the house, and my mother would grab her badge and accompany them. The neighbors began thinking that the Britton boys were in trouble with the law. When we amalgamated with the city of St. John in 1967, her duties came to an end. She gave the badge to me as she knew I was interested in history and things that tell a story. Now you know a story that not many people are familiar with. I plan on donating the badge to the police museum, but right now I can't part with it. And I just thought it was such a beautiful story. And Hugh often posts on this site. I encourage you to go and have a look. And I did check in with Scott today, and he referenced the impact that Ruth had on them as a family. So just to share a really beautiful memory of one of the very special people that makes St. John who it is and what it is today. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't think I saw anyone else, so we'll move on. Thank you. Next item, Carmen Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. Next item is a presentation, and it's item 8.1 on your agenda. And this presentation is for the Shared Risk Pension Plan. And 3 people have been invited from the pension board. We have John Warrington, Eve Plourde, and Fred Slip.
Okay, well, good evening. Hello, Mr. Slip.
Worship.
Yep, go ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. I'm here as the St. John Shared Risk Pension Board. It's been requested to provide a presentation and information to Council. Right now, I am serving as the chair of the Shared Risk Pension Board, Board of Trustees, which is tasked the responsibilities of administering the Shared Risk Pension Plan. We do that under the guide with the guide of 3 documents, basically. The Memorandum of Understanding, the plan text, which was developed from that Memorandum of Understanding, and the City of St. John Shared Risk Plan funding policy. Those are the guidelines that we use to administer the plan, and those 3 documents are signed by the parties, the city and the unions. With me tonight, I have Eve Plourde from Morneau Chappelle and John Warrington, the board's plan administrator. Yves is going to give a presentation on some of the funding background of the city, or of the plan to the city. Yves, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Slip.
Thank you, Fred. Members of council, your worship. My name is Yves Claude from Arnaud Chapelle, the actuary for the pension plan. Now, what's the best way to make a presentation here, Jonathan? Should I share the presentation myself, or is there somebody at the city doing that?
Yes, Yves, it's easiest if you just share your screen.
Okay. Let's see how that goes. No, that's not the right document. Just a second here. I have many documents open and I shouldn't have done that. Okay. Does everybody see the presentation? And certainly, if you want to ask questions, you can certainly ask questions as I go along. I understand I have about 15 minutes.
Yeah, so Mr. Plourde, what we'll do is, yes, we do see your presentation. Thank you. I think what we'll do, just to keep some decorum here as well, we'll have you go through the presentation, and then if you wouldn't mind to stop sharing your screen, and then we'll go back for questions if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is the actuarial valuation results as of January 1st, 2020. It's, I guess, a little bit dated at this point in time, but it takes time to do evaluation, get the data, compile the data, present the results to the Board of Trustees. Then the Board of Trustees need to act on this information. We were scheduled to present to Council back in the fall. Given the IT problems, I think everything was canceled and rescheduled. So this is then what I'm talking about is January 1st, 2020 at this point in time. I will provide color comments about what happened in 2020, but keep in mind that the results that I'm presenting here are as of January 1st of 2020. The board does evaluations every year, actuarial valuations, and that allows the board to see the financial position of the plan and understand what's happened over the year that has gone by in terms of the assets, but also in terms of membership demographics, and looking at assumptions. So we can determine the financial position, and we'll look at all those measures tonight as of January 1st, 2020 for the pension plan. We also calculate risk management tests for the pension plan. As some of you may be aware, members are at risk in a shared risk plan in the sense that benefits can be increased, but also could be potentially reduced if things go bad. And so we do manage things in a risk-focused management for the pension plan. We'll look also at some benefit improvements that were approved by the board following the January 1st, 2020 valuation, and those become effective 1 year later on January 1st, 2021. And I'll touch briefly on the pandemic, COVID-19, and the impact that had over 2020, and also the organizational restructuring that happened during 2020 at the city. So if we start with the membership, just very quickly, you have about 826 active members at January 1st, 2020 in the plan. There are some disabled members, so people who are on disability right now, continuing to accrue but not receiving a pension. Deferred vesteds of 32, those are people who have left the employ of the city but have left their money in the plan and will come back later to start collecting their pensions. And there's 893 pensioners that are receiving their pension at this point in time from the city. So you have a bit more pensioners in your plan that there is actually active members working at the city, and that does show the fact that the plan is an old, mature pension plan that's been around for very long. In terms of the assets in the pension plan, and this is the year 2019. As I mentioned, we do this valuation annually, and so this is the valuation as of January 1st, 2020. So we look at what happened in the year prior to January 1st. That would be 2019. The plan started the valuation for the year 2019 at $595 million. It ended the year at $663 million at the end of 2019, or January 1st, 2020. And right now, as we speak, we are actually quite above the $700 million in the pension plan. The rate of return over 2019 was 12.6%, which is a very good year for a pension plan in terms of investments in a year. That was 2019. Contributions come in. There's contributions from the member and the city that are put into the pension plan, and investment income. This is all invested in the markets, in obligations, equities, also in infrastructure, real estate, mortgages, and the like. So a very diversified base of investments that earned $77 million in 2019. There were $33 million paid in pensions and benefits, and $2.7 million paid in expenses to administer the pension plan. So in $663 million is the amount of assets at January 1st, 2020. Like I said, today, 1 year later, we're in excess of $700 million. And we did, in 2020, a return of about 8% for the assets of the pension plan. And that includes a major market downturn, as you may recall, that occurred in March due to at the onset of the pandemic. But to the surprise of most everybody, the financial markets have actually recovered quite quickly from the original impact of the pandemic. And we found ourselves at the end of the year, at the end of 2020, with about 8% return in the pension plan, which is actually not a bad year in terms of investments. In terms of trying to value what the pension plan should have in the pension fund to pay for the benefits, we need to put a value on those benefits. And in order to put a value on the benefits, we make assumptions about the future. We have to make economic assumptions and demographic assumptions. And so the economic assumptions, the main one that we are making is a 4.5% discount rate. And that's supposed to represent a very conservative estimate of how much we expect the pension fund to earn into the future. It's a very conservative estimate. We actually, on average, think that the pension fund can earn more like 5.9% per annum, given the type of investments and its diversified nature. But we do the valuation at 4.5, so that's an element of conservatism. So more often than not, we'll have some gains coming up from the investments that will hopefully add to the surplus and give us some nice returns in the future. Other assumptions are demographic assumptions that we need to make as actuaries. We need to look at mortality rates, retirement rates, termination rates, and items of the like, in order to be able to determine how much money needs to be paid over time from the pension plan to the members. And that's where we come with a liability. And so at January 1st, 2020, like we saw already, we had $663 million in terms of assets in the pot. But against that, we have $676 million in liabilities. And so that's the present value of all future payments to be made to the pensioners and the survivors, but also to your current active members for when they will retire. There's $225 million there set aside to pay for those benefits when they come due, and then the deferred vesteds. And we have a small reserve here for future indexing. So this liability is the amount of money we expect based on the assumptions should be set aside in order to pay the benefits that are due by the plan. And it wouldn't include any indexing in the future. Indexing is not a benefit that's automatically provided in the plan. When I talk about indexing, I talk about increases to pension due to inflation in the future. And so those are provided only by the board when and if the plan can afford it. And the board looks at it every year and makes that determination based on tests that are found in the funding policy, risk management tests. And so at January 1st, 2020, we had a small deficit in the plan of $12 million. So it was 98% funded. This compares to the year prior at 89.9%. So there was quite a significant improvement in the funded status of the plan from 89 to 98. And that's basically due to the fund rate of return of 12% in 2019, which exceeded our discount rate of 4.5%. Quite significantly, or by about 8%. So that's where the increase in the funded ratio is basically coming from. The ratio when the plan was first, if some of council was there at the time it was converted back in 2013 to a shared risk plan, that ratio here was about 73%. So there's been a significant improvement in the financial status of the pension plan over the last 7 years, basically. So it's been since the reform, I believe, a nice story for the pension plan as it continues towards improvement. Here I show normal cost and excess contribution. So I showed you the financial position based on the liabilities, which is the value of the benefits that have accrued up to the valuation date. Here we talk about the normal cost, which is the value of the benefits that will accrue in the year following the valuation, and that's 14.4% of payroll. Towards that, there's employee contributions that are coming in every year at 10.4% of payroll. The city contributes 13.1 as a permanent contribution. It matches by about 125% the city, the member contribution, and then adds up to that a 17% special temporary contribution that will end in 2028 of 17% of payroll. And so there's a total here of around 40% of payroll coming in with a current service cost of 14. So there's 26% of payroll, which is the excess of the contributions over the normal cost, excess contribution of 26.1%. So those are contribution over and above the cost of the benefits that are accruing. And those contributions serve to strengthen the pension plan, but also to be able in the future to provide indexing to benefit the members in the long run. And the present value of that $17.4 million of contribution over the next 15 years represents $163 million. So we do expect to get this $163 million over the next 15 years. And that's why when the board looks at the funded ratio, they add to the value of the assets in the fund, this present value of excess contribution, because that's money that's is expected to come into the pension fund and will benefit, will be able to be used in order to provide benefits and secure the benefits that are already there. So the total assets, including the present value of excess contribution, is $827 million compared to the liability of $676 for a funded ratio, being just the ratio of the 827 over the 676 of 122%. And that's the ratio that the board uses every year in order to determine if they can afford to provide indexing to the members, to provide benefit improvements. And it will also be the ratio that will be used if ever it gets too low to increase contributions or to reduce ultimately benefits if it gets really low to below 100% for 2 years in a row. So that's an important ratio that is used every year by the board. In terms of risk management tests, so every year the board looks at various probabilities, but the most important one is the probability that benefits will not be reduced over the next 20 years. So we just want to make sure that the pension plan is managed in a conservative way. And so therefore, if this ratio here of 98.7% falls below 97.5%, then the board cannot award any indexing or any benefit improvement. It's deemed that it's not secure enough. But while this ratio is above 97.5%, which is the probability that benefits will not be reduced over the next 20 years, then the Board of Trustees can continue to award indexing to the members of the pension plan. And a second risk management test that they have is to look at how much indexing we expect the plan will be able to provide into the future. given where the funded ratio sits today, given the investments, given the assets, given our expected future returns. We expect that on average, over the next 20 years, the plan will be able to provide 95% of CPI, which is Consumer Price Index. So that's a measure of inflation. So 95% of inflation will be able to be provided, we expect, over the next 20 years, which is a very high measure. Basically, full indexing based on full inflation provided as indexing to the members of the plan. Here we show over the next 20 years where we expect this funded ratio to move. It is starting at 122, like you saw at this point in time, as of the date of the valuation. And then we do expect it to, over time, to slightly go higher. And so that's a nice thing, is over time, given the design of the plan, given where we expect indexing inflation to be, and investment returns to be, we expect that this ratio will, over time, tilt towards a higher position to about 140 on average by 20 years from now. And so that's a great graph that shows that based on the design that we have right now, we put the chances of success on our side. I believe it's well designed, and it will provide members with benefits for the future that they can count on. And so, like I said, every year, based on the financial status of the plan, the board looks at the funded position and determine if they can conservatively provide some indexing to the members of the plan. And the way they do that, they look at their open group funded ratio, and it's at 122. If it's above 105, then they can provide 1/5 of the excess above 105. And so that amounts to 3.44% of the liability, or an amount of $23 million can be spent. So it's not all the surplus. It's just a small portion. It's 1/5. And it can be spent on indexing. The funding policy actually lists the items that the Board of Trustees have to commit these funds to, and the first is indexing. And so there's various steps here that I have on slide 13, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are the steps every year the board looks at, depending on how much is available for utilization every year. And then they grant up to the amount that's available, and only up to that amount. They're not allowed to spend more than that. And they look at step 1, inflation. And so that's the inflation here, 1.95% in 2019. And because that cost $12.5 million, so they were allowed to implement that. They can implement up to full CPI or full inflation, and it was 1.95 in 2019. So that becomes effective on January 1st, 2021. So all the retirees in the pension plan will have seen their pension checks for the month of January just now increased by 1.95 compared to what it was last year. Step 2 would be to do any CPI if it had missed in the past. If in the past that they would not have been able to grant full indexing, then they can do it retroactively. Here, they've been able, since the conversion of the plan to a shared risk plan in 2013, to provide full indexing. So there's nothing to recognize here. There's also the potential under step 3 to increase the accrued pension of active members based on if the average wage index in Canada, so increases in average wages in Canada, have gone higher than inflation. So the active members can benefit from that, and that at a cost of $1.2 million that was provided as well. And step 4 and 5 allows the improvement of the early retirement rules such that there is no reduction for early retirement if you meet the rule of 85. And so that's the current rule that right now members have to follow is if you retire early before age 65, there's a 6% per year penalty that you have to incur. on your accrual, your more recent accrual. So with this improvement here, the accrual 2018 and 2019 being the most recent ones, then can be paid unreduced if you have the rule of 85. So that can be provided at 5 million. And then there was a 4.6 million set aside as a reserve for future indexing should the plan not have enough money to provide indexing in the future. This is kind of a fund for a rainy day. So that totals 23.3 million. So those improvements are looked at every year. They're an integral part of the design of the pension plan. Members do count on these benefit improvements to come in, especially the indexing. It was designed such that the board should have been able to provide those every year. And so in accordance with the funding policy, they do make sure they look at it every year, or they have to as part of the funding policy to look at that every year. And if the board, if the pension fund is in a position to be able to provide those, then they are provided. So that sums up the benefit improvements that they provided this year, effective January 1st, 2021. There's just a short few words here about the COVID-19 pandemic. And as I mentioned, it's impossible from a pension plan perspective to really assess the long-term impact of the pandemic, especially from a mortality perspective, knock on wood, in Eastern Canada or in the Atlantic. We have not been impacted as other regions have by the pandemic or the mortality, the immediate mortality that other regions are suffering, but we don't know what the long-term impact are, and we're still in the middle of it. We don't know what the long-term impact on mortality is for people that are catching it maybe at 45 with no symptoms, but over time, who knows where that leads. So it's something that as actuaries, we will spend some time looking at, but at this point in time, it's way too early to determine if there's going to be any long-lasting impact. But there was certainly a short-term impact, especially in the financial market. Like I mentioned earlier, in March, we had a significant drawdown in the pension fund assets. It really at one point was minus 10%, but it has rebounded since then, and for 2020, we ended the year with actually a very good investment return of around 8% for the pension plan for 2020. The other thing that's not included here in the valuation, because it's January 1st, 2020 valuation, is the organizational restructuring at the city that went on during 2020. It certainly is something that does impact the pension plan as you remove active members from the pension plan or you reduce your workforce. It does reduce the funded ratio of the pension plan, so that open group funded ratio that's at 122% is reduced because of that, because there's less excess contribution, less of that special contribution coming from the city being made, because they're all as a percentage of salary. So if there's less of a salary base, then those are funds that the pension plan was counting on but is not receiving. So that there's a negative impact there. And the board has been provided with back in the fall and in the late summer with some of expected impact on that potential restructuring. We're still looking at it, assessing it, and we'll determine what that impact might be when we get that. The next board meeting is in February, and that's on the agenda for more of a discussion, given that we have more information on it right now. So thank you. That, I guess, completes my formal comments at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Plourde. Okay, we'll open up we'll just ask you to maybe stop sharing. I know you're clicking, so we'll...
I'm clicking here.
Yeah,
I'm
no
trying
worries.
to figure it out.
Yeah. I think you just go just to the left of leave and yeah, you got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well done. Thanks for the presentation. Comments, questions, council? Mr. Merrithew, maybe just you put your hands up, council members, but I'll start off with our commissioner or our finance chair and Councillor David Merrithew. Who may or may not be frozen. David, are you frozen? You look frozen. Okay, we'll come back to the councillor, Deputy Mayor.
I don't really have a question, but I want to just make a statement because it's been 7 years, and our presenter, who did an excellent job, I think, in showing us exactly where the pension plan is. 7 years ago, the city was, the council particularly was wondering if we should go with shared risk model, and there was all kinds of issues on it. I mean, we had so many meetings on pension issues. I can remember that, and I'm very pleased to hear you say that we did the right thing and that the plan has come a long ways from then. You know, it's made money. It's not a negative to the city anymore, and I'm sure, Fred, you probably might want to say something on that. Fred Slip, you were involved at the time, and you know, I want to say that I think the board over the last 7 years has made some good decisions. I want to thank them for their input and the way we had structured the board with members of the community along with the leaders of our unions. I think they've done a very good job. So I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment on that. I just feel that I think that, you know, over time it's worked out, which it was very questionable at that time. We weren't sure of what we were doing.
So I don't think that was a question. That was more of a statement, Deputy Mayor, that you're making. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you to the people that worked on it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? Council? Councillor Matthews. Thank you. Councillor Reardon, I apologize. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Plourde, for your presentation. I was going to actually ask you if you would briefly say where we are today versus 2013 when we did that. I was on council then. We had just been elected in 12, and we had this gigantic, you know, issue coming our way. And so I'm just curious as to what your thoughts would be if you have that history of where we were there then, where we are now, and a little bit of the differential between the two going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, for your worship. Like I mentioned, I guess a little bit earlier, the funded ratio of the plan without the excess contribution was 73% when we started, and it's 98% today. And actually, it's higher than that today because that's the January 1st, 2020. As we sit today, it's probably a little higher than that. And so that's a significant improvement in the funded ratio. The other ratio we look at is the open group funded ratio. The one that's 122 today was 107 at the time. And so that also improved quite significantly over the last 7 years. And so that's another good story there. If you remember back in 2013, and I was there as well in some fashion, is the city was looking at a 45% of payroll annual contribution to the pension plan if nothing was done, and through the reform was able to reduce it to about 30% of payroll, and that's what it's been contributing since then. And even with that amount of money, we've been able to improve the pension plan significantly. So I'm quite pleased with the last 7 years. And I think it's set up for success in the future as well. As one of the graph that I purposely put in here shows the funded ratio actually over the next 20 years expected to go up nicely and smoothly over time. So that also gives us hope for the future. So I'm very hopeful for the future. Thank you.
Now, the other question I have for you is there are 826 active members versus 893 pensioners are surviving. Is that normal? Is that a normal for most pensions?
Absolutely. It really shows where your pension plan has been for a pension plan like yours, because you're a city that's been around for quite some time, and the pension plan has been around for quite some time. And so it's normal in an environment where you've had this pension plan for many years that the number of retirees exceeds the number of active members. And that would be the case for some other older cities. That's also the case for certain provincial plans, like the teacher's pension plan, for example, that's been around forever, as actually more mature than your plan. It's got a lot more retirees, maybe a ratio of 2 to 1 in terms of numbers of retirees to active members. So we do see that. So it's not something that deters us. It's just something that needs to be, it's the reality for a plan that's been around as long as the City of St. John pension plan.
Now, the funding policies that you mentioned, do they come from the board?
The funding policy was a document that was outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding. It was as a result of the reform and was negotiated between the city and its unions. And so it's a result of that process that you went through in 2013, where that document was developed.
Now, the deputy mentioned that some of the union reps, et cetera, are on there. Does the city have representation on that, on the board? I'm just wondering how many members do you have and who's on the board?
I'll let maybe the chair respond this one.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, the city has, the board is comprised of 8 trustees. The city appoints 4 members, and each of the local unions appoints 1 member. So it's equal representation. A comment that I've really found that the board has operated very successfully with good cooperation between all trustees.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Merrithew, and then I see you, Councillor Norton. Councillor Merrithew.
I apologize, folks. Just as soon as I went to speak, I went offline. Happens about once a meeting here. Again, I apologize. Again, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Plord. Appreciate it. Can you go back to funding policy valuations? You know, you're using some numbers there, but you talk about our temporary contributions of 10 or 11 million bucks in that equation. Now, that ends in 2028, but you're going 15 years out. Can you explain that to me? Or am I missing something, sir?
No, the temporary contribution will go up until 2028. But when I do my calculation of the next 15 years, I stop counting the temporary contribution after 2028. So I don't include the full 15 years for the temporary contribution, but I do for all the other items.
And where do we have to be if we were to stop those contributions earlier than 28? Where would the funding percentage-wise have to be in the pension?
The funding policy as a provision that if you are above 150% on your ratio, that's the one that's comparable to the 122.2 that I've shown to you. So if that 122.2 is to go above 150 at some point in the future before 2028, but after 2023, it cannot be earlier than 2023, then at that point in time, there's a provision in the funding policy that the temporary contribution can stop. But it's a 150, to answer your question, is the ratio instead of 122. So we need some significant investment returns to get there. I wouldn't hold my breath at this point in time. I think it's gone really well and it's done really well. But to reach 150 before 2028, there would have to be some serious market returns coming our way.
Again, your economic assumptions of 4.5% return, you've done another 8 approximately this year, 3.5% over that. So it's been good, but you're telling me probably not good enough. Question I have, what happens if at 28 it ends and it's not at somewheres between 122 now and 150?
Oh, well, it will end in 2028 no matter what. Regardless, wherever that is, in 2028, it's over. It ends. There was a 15-year period, and that's it.
When will we know? Will we know in February what we think the reduction of, and if, forgive me, Mr. Plord, it's not in front of me, some 80 members perhaps, again, it's not in front of me, sir, yep, to the plan and COVID. Will we know in February what that might be doing to the plan?
So for the organizational restructuring, I think that's what you're referring to, the reduction in the number of active members. The board is currently looking at it, and I will be presenting some numbers at their February meeting. So I would expect that at some point after that, the results will be shared with the city and the unions.
All right. That's it for now. Thank you, folks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, more of a statement, but thanks to Councillor Merrithew and his role as Finance Chair for asking some good questions about where we would be in 2028, especially. But I think for me, it just underscores, as it relates to the performance of the plan. I think it underscores the fact that we made the right decision converting to a shared risk pension plan. It also confirms for me that it's important that the composition of the pension plan board of trustees remains as it is, so that they can continue to do the good work that they're currently doing, and that that the chances that base benefits will not be reduced. I think that's positive as well. I think if there's a good news story for that, very high percentage that we're not going to have to touch those base benefits, and that pensioners won't see any reduction in those. But another good example of the fact that St. John City Council and politics don't have any, as far as I'm concerned, any place with the composition of the pension board of trustees. Appreciate the report. I think that's great on an annual basis in terms of how it's reporting, but in terms of the composition, the governance, let's leave well enough alone and allow them to continue on the good road that they are. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands. I've got a couple of questions myself, Mr. Plourde, Mr. Slip. Thanks for being here, and I think you had another member here. So you guys are doing well when the third member doesn't have to take. There's John. Hi, John.
Hi.
A couple of questions. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, and I guess I asked the questions through the lens of the taxpayer who's been paying an additional $11 million. And I'm going to the slide. So Councillor Merrithew asked my question around the indicators or where we needed to get to, Eve, to end the special pension payment. So it will end by 2028 absolute, but if we get to 150% funded ratio, it could end prior to that.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
correct.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. And then, and I don't know, so since roughly 2013, and I don't know if it's to you or to a commissioner of finance, the taxpayers have been putting in an additional investment, a special pension investment of I think it was $11.3 million last year. Has that been about $11 million a year since 2013?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been very consistent. It's a percentage of salary, and your number of active members has hovered in the 825 to 850 for the last 7 years. So the special contribution would have been in the vicinity of $10 to $11 million.
Okay, and then I had heard about your slide 13. You did an excellent job of explaining. So I guess within the memorandum, there's a mechanism that allows for, in the case of 2019 or 2020, for $23 million to be taken out of the fund, and and if I'm using the wrong term, and benefits restored to members within that memorandum. Am I saying that properly?
It's every year, because we don't put in the liability the value of the future increase in pensions, and because there's cost of living increases every year, in order for pensioners to keep their purchasing power, but not just pensioners, actually active members, their pensions are calculated based on their current salary, but we increase their accrued pension every year with that indexing as well, because we want them to be able to keep their purchasing power when they do retire. And so that's found in the funding policy, and that's they have to look at that every year. It's an integral part of the design of the pension plan that they look at that, and if it's deemed that they can afford to provide it, then they have to provide it to the members. But the rules are there. The amount they can spend is defined. And if the risk becomes too high, if the 98.5, the 98% goes below 97.5, then those will have to stop until such time as it is restored. So there are automatic mechanisms in there that protect the funds in cases where the funds it's not appropriate or it's too risky to spend the funds. But when those risk measures are met, then the board looks at it and can spend the fund in accordance with the funding policy.
So in each of the years since 2013, has there been some amount of money like you've profiled on page 13 that have been taken to renew some benefits to members?
Well, each and every year, it's the same actually benefits that we look at every year. So it's indexing for the prior year. It's the average wage. If it's higher than CPI, it's early retirement reduction. I've shown on the slide there that the early retirement reduction to rule of 85 for year of accrual 2018 and 2019 was done this year, but in prior year we had to do 2013 to 2017. So those were done already in prior years. So every year we looked at that, and if the money is there, then those are implemented.
Yeah, so I guess I can go back through previous reports, but I'm just trying to do quick math. Out of some 77 million additional dollars paid by taxpayers, how much of that money went back to restoring benefits in the plan? Can I find that in each year's report?
We would have to look at it in each and every year because there was some fluctuation depending on the ability of the fund that year to provide the benefits. So it was 23 million that we could provide last year, but the year before was only, I believe, 15 million. So there was some kind of volatility, the amount the board could provide from year to year. It's not like the temporary contribution, which was 10 to 11 million every year. That goes up and down. And so we would have to go back to the reports and figure it out that way. Unfortunately, I don't have in front of me all those numbers, but they would be easy to get. Okay,
thank you. And then I guess so we're somewhere between currently with, I'm talking taxpayer contributions here. Employees contributed 6.8 million in this report. Taxpayers contributed 19.7 million. So we're somewhere around 30% of payroll. How do I, and obviously you said before it would have been 45% of payroll, which would have bankrupted probably the whole city, even though that's not a mechanism. How does that compare? I don't know, like do you manage private sector pensions as well?
Oh yeah, no, and you know, in all fairness, there's not a whole lot of defined benefit or shared risk plan left in the private sector. You would compare to defined contribution pension plan, but in the public sector, where there's still many cities with defined benefit pension plans, and the provincial government has still all shared risk plans, has gone through a reform at about the same time the city has. The contributions are probably a little lower than the city of St. John. That 17% of temporary contribution is there for a reason. It's because you were starting probably from a position where it was much lower than other pension plans, and so therefore there was a little bit of a shot in the arm to the pension plan. Sorry for the reference here, but to do for the first 15 years. But when you look at 13% of payroll, then for after the temporary contribution stops, then that becomes more reasonable in terms of a contribution anywhere between 10, 11, 12% for a public sector plan is not unreasonable from a contribution perspective.
Okay, and sorry, thank you very much, Yves and Mr. Plourde. Last question I have is, I wasn't around, but back, and I don't even know who to, city manager, you weren't here, Commissioner of Finance, who was, we said earlier, something to the effect that this was a plan negotiated between the city and its members. Who was on the negotiating team for the city? City manager, I guess I'd direct it to you, but you weren't here, so Commissioner of Finance, or
I might be able to help you.
I'd just like to hear from the Commissioner.
Yeah, I was not involved back in 2012 in that capacity, Worship, so I'm not aware of who would have been on the negotiating team for the city.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Slip.
I believe that the provincial government provided task force members to come down and mediate sessions between the unions and the city council, and it went back and forth, and the memorandum of understanding was written from those meetings.
Okay, thanks. So I guess what I'm trying to, so was it a deal negotiated between the unions and city council, or a deal negotiated between the unions and the city of St. John? So in other words, was the commissioner of finance, the city solicitor, the common clerk, and the city manager involved in these negotiations?
No, I don't believe they weren't in the meetings that the local had with the task force. And then the task force would go back to the city, or I don't know if it's city council or city management, and they were like a mediator.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I didn't see any other hands. Thank you, Mr. Slip. Thank you, Mr. Plourde.
Pleasure.
Mr. Warrington, thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Reardon, did you have a?
I just have one last quick question. Is there a way for us to contemplate and prepare for the change, the extension in life expectancy as we go forward? Because I'm sure a lot of these plans initially were designed when the life expectancy was probably 65 or 70. And now life expectancy's changed over those last 40 years or 50 years or whatever. It changes the burden, I guess, that would be put on the plan to a certain extent. And then, you know, if you have less members that are actually working and contributing versus people who are collecting. So how do we mitigate that, or do we?
Yeah. Up till now, we haven't specifically mitigated that, but in our valuation, we do take into account that mortality does improve over time. And so in the liability figures that I've shown you, I do expect people live based on current mortality table, but also putting in there a special factor for the fact that people will, mortality will improve, so people will live longer. And so that's already included in the liability. We're not stuck with the assumptions that they used 45 years ago when those plans were put in place. It's been already recognized that people live longer. It's in the liability. It's already provided for. Now, if we want to go further than that, in maybe trying to buy some longevity insurance or insurance contracts, those would typically be something the board could look at, but they're typically extremely expensive. And for the extra cost, it's probably worth doing the investments and taking the risk on the investments to actually try to insure the contracts with an insurance company, especially an indexed benefit, which there is no real market in Canada or real good market in Canada. They can charge whatever they want, which is typically a lot of money for those types of pensions.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can I have a receive and file, please, Council? Thank you, Councillor Reardon, Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Slip, Mr. Plourde, Mr. Warrington. I think it's an excellent presentation. It should happen annually. I know we got a little fetched up with a few other issues, but thank you for coming in. It's important to be sharing this information with the public. And I know your board meets regularly, and I know you have your annual reports. I did appreciate the presentation today. Really, thank you very much, and wish you a great night. Okay.
It's our pleasure, and we enjoy coming back anytime that you feel warranted.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay, the motion's on the floor. Sorry, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, and anyone contrary minded? Thank you. Motion's carried. Next item, Common Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. Next item is a consideration of bylaw. It would be item 10.1 on your agenda, and this is for the vehicle for hire bylaw first and second reading. There's a staff report attached outlining the nature of the amendment.
Okay, thank you. To move to first reading, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Okay, great. Sorry, Councillor Reardon, you have a question?
I just have a quick comment, I guess, that this amendment to the bylaw has demonstrated that that industry is struggling. So we're going to extend length of time that a vehicle can be used from 7 years till 8 years. So, I think it's significant that the taxi industry is a struggling industry in St. John. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thanks.
A law to amend a bylaw respecting the regulation and licensing of owners and operators of vehicles for hire in the City of St. John.
Okay, thank you. Second reading, moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Thank you. Okay, great. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. The motion's carried.
A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulation and licensing of owners and operators of vehicles for hire in the City of St. John.
Okay, thank you. Next item. You muted yourself, Common Clerk.
Sorry about that. My thumb must have hit that by accident. So item 10.2 on your agenda is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment with section 59 conditions for 144 Lansdowne Avenue, and this is for third reading. It would require 3 motions of council, one for third reading by entirety, another motion for section 59 approval, and a third motion for third reading by title. And I'd just like to point out that Councillor Strobridge had been absent for the public hearing at 10.2 and 10.3.
As was Councillor Casey as well. So if you just want to turn your camera off, Councillor Strobridge, please. Now's your time to get your drink of water if you'd like, and we'll call you back. Thanks. Okay, now the motion by entirety, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Mackenzie, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone?
This is a law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, be it enacted by the City of St. John and Common Council convened as follows. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John enacted on the 15th day of December 2014 is amended by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 583 square meters located at 144 Lansdowne Avenue, also identified as PID number 55223416, from low-rise residential to local commercial, pursuant to a resolution adopted by Common Council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act, all as shown on the plan attached here to and forming part of this bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Section 59. Moved by the deputy, second by Councillor Merrithew. Thank you. On that question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone? Motion's carried. And by title. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Thank you. The motion is carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Thank you. Next item.
10.3, Your Worship, is another third reading, and it's a proposed zoning bylaw amendment with Section 59 conditions at 19 Paddock Street.
Okay, thank you. By entirety, please. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not, sorry, let me back up. Councillor Strobridge was absent for 10.3 as well. Yeah, I apologize. So Councillor, we'll just have you turn your camera off again. You're absent for this item as well. So I'll just call that vote again, please, Council. So on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Thank you. Not seeing or hearing anyone?
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, be it enacted by the City of St. John and Common Council convened as follows. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John, enacted on the 15th day of December 2014, is amended by 1, amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John, by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 380 square meters located at 19 Paddock Street, also identified as PID numbers 000-15974, from urban center residential to mixed commercial, pursuant to a resolution adopted by Common Council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act, and 2, repealing subparagraph 11.82B3, all as shown on the plan attached here too and forming part of this bylaw.
Okay, section 59, please. Deputy again, thank you. Councillor Reardon, thank you. On the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. And by title. Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Moved by Councillor Hickey, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. On the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing anyone or hearing anyone. Thanks. The motion's carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next item.
Next item is 11.1 on your agenda. It's a submission from Councillor Norton with respect to Ability NB.
Yeah, one moment, sorry, Councillor. Councillor Strobridge, if you can hear us, you can turn your camera back on. And yeah, there you are. Thank you. Welcome back. We missed you. Okay, Councillor Norton, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'll read the motion, and if it gets a seconder, I can speak to it or attempt to answer any questions by council this evening. Be it resolved that Common Council refer to the Common Clerk for scheduling a presentation on accessibility within the City of St. John for persons who have a mobility disability by Haley Flaro, Executive Director of Ability NB.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Thanks. Back to you, Councillor Norton.
Yeah, thank you. I can. The background is fairly self-explanatory. I know that as recent as coming this week, that Ability NB will be working with our St. John Ability Advisory Committee to polish their slides for a presentation to council. I think it's something on an annual basis we could always hear more about in our community in terms of building that inclusiveness for all folks. And Ability NB is that one group that certainly joins all of those distinct committees that work to make accessibility better and improved within New Brunswick and St. John. And I think that the presentation will inform us in terms of what we are doing and what we aren't doing, what we can do a little bit better. So it will certainly be a well-informed presentation, and there's nobody better off than Ability NB to do that. And so if council has any specific questions, be happy to hear.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Norton. As we open it up, did you just say that they will be coordinating with our advisory committee?
Yeah, that's right,
Okay.
Haley. I know in Ability NB. In fact, I had a good conversation with Jeff Sparks today with St. John, with the St. John Ability Advisory Committee, and they'll be coordinating and have touch base. So that group in and of itself is quite excited about the opportunity that Ability NB is going to come in and present to council. And of course, their voice and their concerns will be injected in that. And I know that will help address some of the concerns that committee has had in terms of the engagement that the city has been able to extend to the St. John Ability Advisory Committee. So their voice will certainly be reflected in that slide deck when and if council approves this referral motion with the Common Clerk to schedule a presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I don't see any. Okay, Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Norton, I'd like to actually hear from St. John Ability's Advisory Council. It's a committee of council. When I looked up Ability NB, of course, it used to be the Canadian Paraplegic Association, so it's mobility, whereas SJAAC looks at all disabilities. So it would be nice to have that I guess, umbrella of everyone. So I'm wondering if they could both come in at the same time, maybe, and present to council.
Yes, I can answer that, Councillor. the St. John Committee, not only will their voice be infused in that slide deck that Ability MB is going to have, but they plan on being in attendance as well in order to speak to any of the questions that they have. They do see it as an umbrella group and not just exclusive to some of the things that you may read about Ability MB on their website, but that the slide deck will reflect some of the concerns in terms of accessibility for all folks, just not those with mobility issues and concerns. So I think we're going to strike a good balance. They're pleased with it, and I think if you reach out to any of those members, they'll echo that as well.
I just, at transit, we would have, issues with disability with sight. So that's huge for us. So that's why I was thinking that if we could get SJAAC on board as well. I know that their voice will be reflected in that, but it would be really great to have them at the presenting table as well.
Yeah, absolutely, they will be.
Okay.
Okay. Didn't see any other hands, so we'll call the motions on the floor. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Okay, not seeing or hearing anyone. Thank you. The motion is carried. Next item, Common Clerk.
Item 11.2 is a submission from Councillor Norton with respect to ride share.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll read the motion, and this isn't new for any of the council colleagues that have been around, especially during my time. Be it resolved that Common Council direct the city manager to immediately present for consideration a draft bylaw regulating ride-sharing services in the city of St. John. If I get a seconder, I can speak to some of the background here.
Okay, Councillor Hickey has seconded that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey, for putting that on the table. We first off need to publicly say thank you to former Minister Carl Urquhart in his role as Minister for Public Safety, who did a great deal with putting this legislation in place before Minister Fleming and his team brought it before the legislature for consideration. So those two gentlemen and their respective teams certainly saw a need for ride-sharing legislation to be put in place so that cities would be in a place to regulate it within their communities. The background is there. The opportunity is before us now to get a bylaw in place where we can at least open doors for the ride-sharing industry to enter our communities. One of the things I would like to put to rest is the fact that this is not about Uber and Lyft. This is about the chances of Uber and Lyft coming into the city of St. John, I would say, are limited, if any at all. But what we do have is when we create this type of bylaw is we have the opportunity for homegrown types of ride-sharing industries and businesses to pop up, and those have already begun to express an interest in coming if this bylaw was to get crafted and this motion was to get passed this evening. Certainly, this isn't to strike any unnecessary competition with the taxi industry, but competition is good, and creating a larger bandwidth of transportation options in our community is also good. It creates extra employment opportunities for folks in our community. It creates a range of transportation options for folks to choose, whether it's transit, whether it's active transportation, whether it's ride sharing. And at the end of the day, it sets us up for a more progressive landscape for folks to move within our community. I can say that the restaurant sector uptown is certainly looking forward to this. That they see this as something that is beneficial to them, so that they're not completely reliant upon the taxi cab industry as it exists today. So I'd like council to certainly consider the motion. Questions? I'll try my best and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go to you first, Deputy, and then I'll go down through the hands because you showed me a visual hand first, Deputy. Over to you, and then we'll go down through the hands. Yep. You're muted, Deputy. There you go.
Sorry, Your Worship. Okay. I don't disagree with everything that's been said, you know, and at a different time, I would agree. Let's go ahead with this right away. I do have a feeling that this is not the right time. You know, our taxi drivers, our taxi owners in our city are having a desperate time. I mean, it's COVID-19, business is down. Everybody's having a hard time right now, and I just feel that to put more competition on our local taxi businesses, it's not something I, you know, really think that we should do at this time. As I said, at a different time, it'd be wonderful. The economy was great, but my gosh, everybody's struggling in this city. And there's very few uptown restaurants right now that are doing business hoppity hop. You know, it's a desperate time for everyone. I just wonder if we're doing it at the right time. You know, I really feel for what our local businesses are going through, and some of us may not have any idea how desperately things are happening in the city, but there's a lot of people, our own people that have been here for years and years that are having struggling at this time. So for me, it's a matter of timing. I realize that other cities have it, but I do want to ask the city manager, if I may, you know, if there's any way we can know the differences, like what do the share riding companies not do that taxi owners have to do? Like how many, do they all play on the same playing field, or do share riding or ride sharing, do they have lesser regulation? So if your worship, if the city manager has a comment on that, I'd like to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. City manager.
Your worship, through you to the deputy mayor. It's a great question. The staff have not looked at ride sharing in detail. It's always been on our plate, but never took a priority because the legislation was not passed at the provincial level. Now that the legislation is passed, it was already an item on our work plan 2021 that will be briefed to you in a little while. But I'm not in a position to answer today exactly what needs to be in that bylaw, not in that bylaw, to protect the city's interests, to protect our community, et cetera, et cetera. That's all work that needs to be done, including public consultation, et cetera, before I could provide an informed opinion on your question.
Well, I do want to say thank you to the city manager, but I hope that if this does go through tonight and refer to the city manager, that at some point in time, you know, that information is brought to us, how it will affect the local taxi business, unless it comes at a time when our economy is much better. And then I'd feel much better going forward on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just go down through from top to bottom there. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship.
Sorry, Councillor.
The motion and
so, Councillor, sorry, just up your volume. Normally, I don't have to say that to you. I'm having a bit of a hard time hearing you, so just up your volume a little bit. Not too much, but just a little bit.
Well, I don't know. Okay, how's that? Is that better?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk louder. Anyway, as the only person in the business, not the taxi business, but at the ground level, I own bars and all that. And whatever the deputy mayor, I guess, pretty well said what I was thinking. It's just not the right time. As on the ground level, and knowing a lot of these taxi drivers, people have no idea how decimated the industry has been in St. John, including bars, restaurants, which I'm a part of. So at this time, I just won't be supporting the motion. Not that it's not a bad motion, but like the deputy said, I won't say it again. It's just not the right time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think you were cutting in and out a bit, but I think we got the spirit of what you're saying there, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. I've kind of changed my my thinking on this. I mean, I think it's probably a good thing going forward. I do think that a bylaw has to be fair to, you know, everybody, so that we don't put our taxi drivers at risk. I do agree that right now is not a good time, because I see a lot of taxis that are just standing by and nobody's going anywhere doing anything. I think it would be a bad time for them to have to face something like this. But I would certainly, and you know, it does say immediately in the motion. So, I mean, if it's in the municipal plan for 2021, then I look forward to it coming when the timing is right and staff has time to do it. Thank you, Worship.
Sorry, Councillor, you said, I know what you meant. You said municipal plan, but you meant work plan for 2021.
You're right. I did mean.
No problem. Okay, thank you. No problem. Okay. Sorry, I lost my mouse here. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hopefully you can hear me. I wanted to just speak briefly. I do support the motion. I think it's a good step. I think this is the way we need to be thinking as both a council and as a city is, you know, what is becoming the benchmark on these services and how do we meet them? And I think what's unique about our position that is a luxury that a lot of cities haven't had is the ability for us to take our time and do our due diligence in making sure that we have a bylaw that both supports ride sharing and the taxi industry. That's a luxury that a lot of cities haven't had, and I think it's one that we have, and I think it's one that we should absolutely take advantage of. There's lots of really cool examples of smaller cities in Ontario using ride sharing to supplement their transit and to do really cool and impressive things to actually better their city services beyond just having ride sharing. There's companies like Face Drive and things like that that are doing really, really unique and progressive things that I think fit well with both our growth agenda, but also in ensuring that we're supporting municipal services and supporting the private services that also exist. And I think it'd be a great step forward if we could take that step, do it responsibly, and support the folks that are already in the industry while supporting this growing trend as well. Beyond that, you know, I've heard a lot of mention of the timing of things. I mean, I know our staff is quick, but like I wouldn't suspect a bylaw coming around, you know, in the next month or so, a month on this one. So I don't necessarily support that argument. I'm not sure where it's based. I would ask, you know, I would mention to either to Councillor Norton or the folks that have spoken in opposition to it, if the removal of the word immediate would be more supportive if it were to make or break the motion. But those are my thoughts, and I will be supporting the motion.
Okay, thanks. We'll ask, sorry, Councillor, I was just going to ask you to reflect on that because I think it's in our work plan document. You know, maybe it's presumptive, but I think there's mention in our work plan document for ride sharing in 2021. So maybe could you just reflect on that word immediate, and we'll come back to you in a moment. Okay.
Yeah. Your Worship, I can address that now. I wouldn't want. I understand the word immediately. I wouldn't want us to get lost in semantics here as it relates to that. At the same time, I want the language to be strong enough, because in the absence of a word like immediately, I've seen motions never move forward within 4 years. So let's just be really clear about that one. That I want to see a ride sharing bylaw, and sometimes when we don't have precision in our language, like 6, 12, 3 months, and we don't put timelines on it, I don't need to make you familiar with creating SMART goals. So having a timeline, I think, is healthy. At the same time, doesn't have to be immediately. I'm not looking for something to happen tomorrow, but I'd also remind council, Fredericton's already done it and infused the bylaw within their books. It's completely done. We don't have to recreate the wheel here. There's bylaws that exist. There's other municipalities that we can engage about what they're doing that strikes the right balance. And if Checker Cab in the city of Fredericton can do it, we sure as heck can too. So absolutely, we can strike immediately from it if it's going to be done, but it has to get done. We don't want to see this coming in 2022. Let's open it. And folks, I'd also remind, even though we do this bylaw, it doesn't mean that people are all of a sudden going to start coming into our community tomorrow. So
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have no problem with the word immediately or short time turning it around. Just as Councillor Norton has mentioned, there are other cities in Atlantic Canada that have already done it, and certainly I'm sure they would share and help us out, and we could tweak it. The other piece is to those councillors who are worried about the timing. We could certainly bring in a bylaw that's and pass it and have it ready to go and say it doesn't come into effect until January of 2022. You know, I certainly understand where we are right now with regards to COVID and the hard time that people are having, you know, in all sorts of different industries. But, you know, St. John has done so well over the last couple of decades with regards to tourism that folks who are involved in tourism right now are really hurting. But make no mistake, this isn't going to last forever, right? The vaccines are out. You know, the pandemic is going to end. Tourism, because we have such a beautiful city and such good people that are working in tourism, tourism is going to rebound. And one thing I've learned from a little bit of traveling that I've done is when you go anywhere, any progressive city, they have ride shares. You know, and I think it's really important for St. John to be prepared for when our tourism industry rebounds, that option be available, not just to the folks coming in, but, you know, it's, as Councillor Norton has already mentioned, it's one more opportunity for St. Johners to have employment. I think to say no at this point in time presupposes that, you know, a month from now, we're going to have a rideshare company in the city competing with our taxis. And you know what? I don't think from a business point of view, who's going to open a rideshare company right now when everybody is struggling? But I think the time is good to set the table. I would, you know, just my opinion and suggest, but a debate for when it comes before us, that it not be ready to go for this summer. I think you need to give companies time to set up and get ready anyway. And it would make sense to me that while we have talked about it and debated it, we have it in place with this council, and that we set a date that's appropriate. I would suggest January 2022. It seems a logical date. This summer's tourism is still going to be struggling a little bit as vaccines roll out. But I think this is a great example of St. John continuing to adapt, continuing to be progressive. You know, this St. John is really embracing urban living. Our uptown core is vibrant. And, you know, if we want more people to move here, what are they looking for in progressive cities? Well, one of the things on the list is things like ride shares. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'm for ride sharing, and Councillor Norton claims that, you know, competition, you know, is good. And I agree with that, as long as we all are playing by the same rules. And so I don't know if doing the ride sharing bylaw, we should deregulate the taxi industry. You can't have regulations for one industry and not have them for another industry. We don't have a demand analysis. We don't even know what the requirements or the demands are for transportation in regards to anything other than cabs that we have. So I guess I have a few questions. I would be more comfortable, rather than having a bylaw come to us immediately, I would be more comfortable having staff bring me some information about how it will impact the taxi industry, transit, etc., before I went forward. So, I mean, I would support a referral motion to the city manager. I'm interested in ride sharing, but I just want to make sure that we're going about it properly before we leap right in there. So that's my concerns with this.
of just asking for the bylaw to come straight to us without any background information.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of comments, and then City Manager, I see your hand is up, and then we'll send it back to Councillor Norton. So for me, it's an interesting discussion. I think that I think for me, ride sharing is just another piece of the puzzle. It's I think it's what progressive cities do. I don't have all the answers yet. I think that can come from the bylaw and the exploration of the details that, you know, Fredericton has done, Halifax has done, and obviously bigger cities have done across the country. It's interesting, you know, the concern that we have for one industry, you know, in this example where, you know, where some of us are saying, you know, timing is off. Was timing off for us in the market? Should we not have approved a new lease in the market tonight because things are very slow in the market? I just think it's an interesting debate. What if ride sharing is actually a better option for taxi drivers than the current taxi industry is? I don't know. I have had discussion with taxi drivers because I want to better understand their model. I think you'd be quite shocked at some of the fees that taxi drivers pay on a weekly basis. So if we're concerned about the taxi industry, and we likely don't even have the regulatory authority, but are we actually going to drill into the taxi industry and look at the stand fees and insurance fees and costs paid for a $3,000 car and the loan payments that are due per week? So my answer would be no, because it's not, but if we're really going to dig into the industry, let's have somebody dig into it. So I see it as, again, another piece of the puzzle to move people around. You know, what role should the city play in choosing one industry over another? I think I'm not sure that we can do that. Would we deny a building permit for a new restaurant that wants to open in the uptown because the business is slow? I don't think we would. I think it's our job to set the playing field, to set the table for innovation, for industries. And as I say, maybe taxi drivers today want ride sharing, and that's going to be a better platform than the traditional taxi industry. So I think it's, you know, I think, you know, it's in the work plan that we're going to see here in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I think you've heard a bit of feedback, Councillor Norton, on the word immediate. You'll give us some probably additional comments as you wrap up. You know, I think it's, I struggle with us picking and choosing winners and losers. We don't want to do it because timing's off for taxis. I have nothing against taxis, but if we want the taxi industry to flourish, then let's dig in. Let's do a full review of the taxi industry, how it's regulated, who gets what money, and I'd say that's probably way out of scope. So I think we should set the table for innovation. I'm supportive of this. It fits into the bigger picture of a whole range of ways we allow people to move around our city. And like Councillor Hickey said, I've read about some of the small towns and even had some conversations where they're using taxi or ride sharing to supplement transit because it's a lot cheaper than running, you know, buses, or they don't even have buses. So let's not limit ourselves. Let's you know, give our city manager some time to bring this back in the work plan, and then we can have an even more wholesome debate about the T's crossed and I's dotted. So those would be my couple of comments. Thanks. Okay, can I, city manager, did you want to make a comment before I went back to Councillor Norton to wrap us up?
Yes, Your Worship, if I could, because a number of individuals have commented on capacity and the timing for this in terms of getting it done. And I'm not talking about the timing related to COVID. But I think the reality that needs to be recognized, I do in fact struggle with the term immediate. From a staff point of view, I don't believe that there's any resistance to the notion of exploring rideshare and trying to put it into our community. It is a best practice within communities. But from a capacity point of view, I do question the timing of this. We are committing to getting it done sometime in 2021 for implementation in the first part of 2022. To do that before that, I would ask Council to please understand we have choke points in our processes right now between our restrictions due to the cyber attack. Our legal team is working on all sorts of huge files such as Fundy Key, etc. right now, and it is a limited legal capacity. public consultation is more difficult in the COVID timeframe, and this is something where we should do public consultation. This is something that has significant liabilities attached to it. Therefore, we simply cannot copy and paste someone else's bylaw, certainly not someone outside of the province that works under a different legislative framework. For all of those reasons, I would ask that council give consideration to supporting this motion, but to amending the timeline that it be completed sometime in 2021 for implementation at the beginning of 2022. Because to ask me to do it earlier, I'm not sure I even can, but if I can, it will be at the detriment of other priority projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norton, I'll send it back to you to wrap us up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess there's a couple things. I certainly don't mind adjusting the timeline that it's that we have a third reading done and complete in 2021. My experience has taught me that to not put something like that on there, this other priorities will soon take over, and there always will be something. There always will be something. How far spread public consultation needs to go about creating a rideshare bylaw, I think that's up for debate too. I think the public has spoken. I think that certainly many spaces within our community, whether you're a restaurateur, whether you're a local business, whether you're in the tourism sector, they've spoken loud and clear about the fact, look, we want ride sharing, and that's one of the reasons why the legislation was created. And certainly with the legislation that municipalities have, we can regulate stronger and more boldly than the legislation is. We can't do anything less than. But of course, we have to have some of those key fundamentals in there. They're going to have a clean driver's abstract. Upgrade to a Class 4 license, and the provisions of which include providing a medical fitness report, and they're going to have to undergo a check of their driving record. So obviously those are the minimum standards. But I can tell you right now that ride sharing would be a staple within any community that is moving forward. The fact that we're debating whether or not the timing of this is correct or not is beyond me. It's going to take time to draft the bylaw. This signals that St. John is just not all about protecting what we currently have and protecting traditional transportation modes. We have a growing community that is expecting more progressive types of bylaws. This can help reflect that. Looking for council to support this, create new ways of moving around, employment opportunities, as well as reducing. It can reduce things like vehicle traffic. It's better for the environment. It's more cost competitive, and at the end of the day, it does provide the literature's out there. It would provide, in some instances, perhaps a better quality, experience for those that access ride sharing. So looking for council to support this, and of course, nothing has to be brought back. In the immediate future. I think 2021 is reasonable. But I would expect that we have something to consider with a final third reading in 2021. Thanks, Council, for your consideration.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Reardon.
I just want to know what we're going to get back for information. So one of the questions I have is, if I call a cab, I know after tonight it's not going to be any older than 8 years. Does that apply for ride sharing? That's the kind of question. I'm all for ride sharing, but I just need to know how it's going to work with bylaws that we have already in place for another industry that does similar work, and how the bylaws will be for this industry. I'm not trying to protect one industry over another. It is a piece of the puzzle. I just want to make sure that it's all on an equal playing field. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Councillor, my understanding is that the bylaw would help regulate some of the questions that you're looking at. So when the bylaw comes back for consideration, those are regulations that we consider. If you're looking at creating a level playing field, then certainly if somebody was to participate within the ride sharing sector, then you can establish that 8-year-old vehicle condition. That would be a staple if you wanted that. If you didn't want that and somebody wanted to operate something that was much newer, then of course they would have the luxury of doing that. But that's going to be part of, remember, the landscape we operate in, the Municipalities Act causes us to follow legislation as a minimum. If we want to set up tougher regulations within our city, we can certainly do that. But that's going to be reflected in the bylaw, and you'll have an opportunity to do that when staff brings forth their recommendations. This isn't a referral for more information. We have an obligation. If we want to know more about ride sharing, I encourage you to go ahead and check it out. But this is about getting to work on a bylaw.
Yeah, I guess for me, I need to know how it works with the current bylaw we have. That's the information I'm looking.
Let's have our city manager, he had his hand up here, and city manager.
Your worship, just to answer Councillor Reardon's point, this staff, I don't think ever brings bylaws to council without a staff report that talks about the pros and cons and all the considerations. So yes, Councillor Reardon, all that would be in the report that we would be providing to you. As I read the motion this evening, this is not a discussion as to whether or not we should pursue a bylaw. The motion is pursue a bylaw, and with Councillor Norton's amendment, and have third reading by the end of 2021. So back, for example, to the public consultation that Councillor Norton just spoke about. Our public consultation is not to go out there and ask, do you or do you not support the bylaw or rideshare? Our public consultation will be, we're bringing rideshare in. How best do we bring it in? How do we enforce it? What sort of regulations do we need? How can this be a win-win situation for as many people in our community as possible? That's the nature of the public consultation. And we are a different town than Fredericton. So I think we do have an obligation to do that and much more before we bring this back. But that's the focus that we would take. It's not a referral. Councillor Norton did not write it up that way. It is put a bylaw together, but we have some work to do to put the best possible bylaw together for you and provide that to you.
And when that draft comes back, the details will be there that council can debate and
that's correct.
Tweak, adjust. Yeah.
That's
okay.
correct.
All right. Thank you. Okay. The motion's on the floor. It's been tweaked, and I think, was it you, Councillor Hickey, that seconded that? So you're fine with that? There's that slight amendment that it's third reading by 2021. Yeah. Okay. Everybody's good. Okay. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I missed the hands, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Am I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Okay, and those contrary minded. Thank you, Councillor Armstrong and the Deputy Mayor. Okay, thank you. Motion's carried. Okay, thank you, folks. Next item, Common Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. Item 12.1 on the agenda is a verbal update from the city manager.
Okay, thank you. City Manager.
Your worship, members of council, this is my regular recurring operational update to you. This evening it will be singularly focused on COVID-19. You are, of course, aware that we are still in red phase. And although a positive decision was made by COVID cabinet today to return us to orange phase as of midnight Tuesday, not midnight tonight, midnight Tuesday, we are still in red phase. And I guess through you to the public, I would certainly strongly encourage everyone to continue to respect the red phase requirements until midnight tomorrow night, since respect of those requirements has gotten us to a favorable position where we can now, according to the public health experts, go back to orange. I will simply mention, while we remain in red phase, in terms of services provided to the community, I'm very pleased to report that almost all services continue to the community, everything from solid waste management, garbage collection, if you will, public works, and the like continue. The only services that have been removed in red phase are those that needed to be removed because of the COVID protocols. Unless something changes between now and midnight tomorrow evening, starting Wednesday morning, you will see a few noticeable changes when we return to orange. And by way of reminder, that will include that our arenas will reopen on Wednesday for single team practice and drills only, no competition. Our community centers at their choice can reopen. Our buses will return to 50% capacity, which is great news. We should not be leaving people behind at bus stops. And our public playgrounds and outdoor skating rinks can reopen as of Wednesday because we are returning to orange. I would be remiss if I did not close this by reminding through council to the community that orange is not our desired red state, end state rather. We certainly wish to get to yellow and ultimately to green. We know we will not get to green until a vaccine has been effectively distributed, but we can get to yellow. And the best way to get to yellow is for the entire community to continue to push the requirements of orange phase, respect them, have the right behaviors, and then hopefully our time in orange will be short as we move back to yellow. Our St. John Police Force is taking on both an education and an enforcement role in terms of ensuring that the behaviors continue that we have seen experienced in the city over the last little while to drive us to orange and to drive us to yellow, because certainly the best way to recover is to get out of these phases. With that, Your Worship, that concludes the City Manager's operational update. Subject to comments, questions, I'm simply looking for a receive and file.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan moved, Councillor Merrithew seconded. Thank you. Thank you for the update, City Manager, and thank you to the work that staff have done. Thank you to the community. I think we've really buckled down, and I'm still a little bit surprised at the almost daily post of this isn't real. We know we've lost people in our community. We know we've had more losses within the Shanix family, for example. So this is a very serious situation. We're heading in the right direction, but as you say, City Manager, we're not there yet. We need to not let up until we get through this and we get folks vaccinated and so on and so forth. So thank you. Councillor Reardon, comment, question?
Just want to say Yahoo for the buses. It's a tough time of year to have people standing at the bus stop who've probably been there for a little bit, waiting for the bus to arrive, and already 9 people on it. Tough. That's so tough on your drivers. But it's something that has to be done. So I'm so happy to hear that in minus 20-degree weather. Thank you. Thank you.
And Your Worship, if I may, to the councillor on that point, because there's unfortunately a possibility that we may have to go back into red. We are not stopping our efforts with the province to try to find a different control measure should we go back into red to avoid having to go back to 9 plus the driver. So we will continue those efforts even as we transition into orange. But in orange, it is clear we are allowed 50% on the buses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll call the question for receive and file. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Motion's carried. Next item, please.
12.2, Your Worship, is a work plan 2020 review.
City Manager, back to you, sir.
Your Worship, members of council, at great risk, I need to try to share my screen. And that did not work. Forgive me.
No, it's there, sir. Yeah.
No, it's the wrong presentation, Your Worship, so I got to redo that again. Is my presentation up at this point?
Yes, it is, sir.
Thank you. Members of council, it's actually with pleasure that I present to you a review of our 2020 work plan. Actually, the word pleasure doesn't quite cut it. I present this evening with a tremendous amount of pride, not because of anything that I did, quite frankly, but the team consisting of the entire staff, city council, and quite frankly, our community that also contributed to getting a lot of these things across the finish line have led us to the reality that 2020 was an exceptional year for all sorts of reasons. And over the next few minutes, I hope to be able to highlight that to everyone. First of all, before I begin, I decided to put this slide together to quickly describe the role of the staff, because we keep talking about the staff and what the staff will do. Obviously, our primary role is to provide advice to council, and then once we've done that, to execute the will of council. But the reality is that it does not stop there. We believe to our core in the importance of delivering services to our community. We are a service-based organization, and that drives obviously what we do, but how we think through various problems. We are equally committed to ensuring the best value for money. So we seldom get a resolution from council that says, staff, make sure that you get best value for money. It doesn't come across that way. It's a mindset, it's an approach that is taken by the staff, because that is, of course, what the public service should be doing. And we are embracing this notion of a continuous improvement culture. I like to say it more simply than that, work hard to always be better. And certainly that drives a lot of the staff right now, and you will see that both in the results for 2020, but in the work plan for 2021 that I will show in a moment. I think it's important to also highlight to the community what consumes the time of the staff. The largest part of our time is consumed in routine daily operations and functions. Fixing potholes, delivering a transit system, development permits, community service activities such as parks and playgrounds. The list goes on and on and on. That consumes almost all of our time. However, the reality is there are emergency operations. And certainly in the last years in the city of St. John, there have been many of these, between major explosions and fires to not one, but two floods of a century. And of course, in this past year, COVID-19, and we are now on to our second cyber attack over the last few years. So emergency operations does consume a fair bit of time. So what is left, and shown in green, is what I term the new stuff. This is the time that we can dedicate to new initiatives, new ideas, and major projects. So it is not as if we have a whole bunch of staff kicking around on any given day, ready to do nothing but the new stuff. We do it on the margins, and we do it on a priority-based basis. I intentionally altered this slide since the time I sent it out to you as members of council and expanded the red, because I think it's important to note, and I will say so again on the next slide, that emergency operations in 2020 took on an entirely new definition. So in terms of a review of the work plan itself for 2020, I'd like to focus in first on the major accomplishments. But before I do, it's important to recognize that these accomplishments were achieved in a year where COVID-19 began in March and has been with us ever since. And I want to just illustrate with one small example of the impact this has on our ability to do other stuff. When COVID-19 hit, we very quickly made a decision to terminate the employment of our casual workers and to not hire casual workers for the summer peak season. That decision, as difficult as it was not terribly time consuming. But the knock-on effects from that decision alone, in terms of reorganizing priorities for everything from ball field maintenance to what grass we would cut and not cut, to what potholes we would repair and how we would manage major projects, were all affected by that one decision. And that holds true for all of the decisions that have been made throughout COVID-19. So it has had an impact on our work plan. And of course, the other event of 2020, which was the cyber attack that started on Friday, November 13th, has had a major effect. And now that we have made the decision to completely rebuild our networks, as was briefed at a previous council, those impacts will continue for another period of time. We will come out of it very well, but it did have an impact on 2020, which will flow into 2021. With that, in terms of the major accomplishments, the first one, the most obvious one, is that we eliminated the structural deficit, which was forecasted to be $10 million in 2021. And I'll speak more about that in our financial analysis. But as part of that, we had to do a major workforce restructure, not only to save money, but also to improve effectiveness. Some examples. We felt strongly we needed an internal audit capability. We created that. We felt strongly that we needed better contract management oversight. We created that. So there are a number of improved effectiveness items that had to be included in the workforce restructure, which basically meant that pretty much everybody's job changed in one shape or form in 2020. We, of course, had the operational audit results and had to develop the implementation plan to address the recommendations that have been supported by Council. We completed the revenue and loan agreements with St. John Energy, our power commission, which will be about $100 million value over the life of the wind farm project, which is a tremendous accomplishment, not only in terms of revenue generation, but probably more importantly, in terms of climate adaptation and green energy. We continued our advocacy work and support to the province for transformational reforms. One of them has gone across the finish line at this point in terms of the changes to the binding arbitration legislation. Regionalization of services has begun with the new Regional Economic Development Agency, and we will continue to work on those. The new Regional Economic Development Model was created, and we effectively and efficiently wind down the pre-existing agencies. We have continued to look at alternative business models for a number of different areas, but most notably the Aquatic Center, TD Station, and the Trade and Convention Center. And immediately post-COVID, we should be able to bring to Council some recommendations in terms of those business models. And of course, not shown because I overlooked it on the Friday version of this, a major move of City Hall that is saving us some $700,000 to $750,000 per year in terms of rental costs to the city. And finally, we have established our Integrated Customer Service Center, Phase 1, although there's still a lot more work to be done. Those were some of the major accomplishments. This next slide that I will not speak to line by line shows some of the other accomplishments in 2020. Near the top, we speak about the development activity and the changes to vacant and dangerous buildings community standards, which improve our community. We have had to adjust all of our practices twice. And there's an interesting side note here. When COVID-19 first hit, we worked very hard to make sure that we could work in the digital environment and changed all of our processes to digital processes. And then in November of this year, we went 180 degrees in the opposite direction and readjusted to have all manual processes. Incredible accomplishments by the staff. We've worked several items in the middle of this slide in terms of community services and in terms of being a welcoming community to those who would choose the City of St. John as their new home. And then near the bottom of the slide, we start to talk about economic recovery, both during COVID and post-COVID activities. On this next slide of other accomplishments, I would simply wish to highlight that despite the COVID year, our grant distribution was pretty much in line with budget, and over $1 million in various grants have been provided to the community in 2020, as shown on this slide. This next slide continues with some of the other accomplishments. Near the top, a very significant accomplishment in terms of final completion of the Safe Clean Drinking Water project, a 5-year project that came in on time and under budget. Simply unheard of normally within the public sector. We've adjusted our water distribution to make sure that the South Bay well field will continue to operate as designed. One that absolutely must be highlighted is the fact that the City of St. John now has a climate change adaptation plan and an action plan, which are incredible steps forward. In the middle of the slide, a number of initiatives were accomplished that will dramatically improve the training and the competencies of our firefighters, who are already an incredibly professional force. And towards the bottom of the slide, or at the bottom of the slide, our first ever annual HR report on the workforce that not only reports out on the status of our workforce, but also makes recommendations for the future. Closing out the accomplishments for 2020, I'd like to speak about the financial accomplishments. I already mentioned that we addressed the $10 million structural deficit. The breakdown is as shown at the top of this slide: $6 million in workforce adjustments, $3 million in terms of service delivery adjustments, and $1 million in continuous improvement initiatives. And that's after the $2 million that were identified in the 2 years prior. Center of the slide speaks to how we've adjusted the cost for our workforce, and it really is through taking 0% pay raises for a period of time, and then the wage escalation policy thereafter. For managers, zeros for 2 years, then wage escalation. For the outside workers, Local 18, a significant reduction in the size of their workforce, 0 for 2 years, and then the wage escalation policy there afterwards. And the transit union also very modest pay raises, including a 0 for one of the years, and then the new wage escalation policy, and they are the second collective agreement to introduce or embrace the wage escalation policy within the collective agreement. Those adjustments, that $10 million eliminating the structural deficit, permitted us to maintain a tax rate for the 12th consecutive year without any tax-based growth in 2020, or virtually negligible tax-based growth in 2020. It was also the 3rd year that we managed to keep the water rates at the same level for flat rate customers, residents, if you will. Other financial accomplishments that are noteworthy: St. John Water has reduced its debt every year for the past few years, and 23, almost 24% total in the past 4 years. Our utility, St. John Water, also has, for the first time ever, an operating reserve, and we certainly have seen the value of reserves as we work through COVID. We continue to decrease our general fund debt, and you see the figures there between 2016 and 2020. We continue to increase our own operating reserves within the general fund. Again, incredibly important to do so that we can address shocks without having to adjust annual operating budgets. And the last one is continuing to increase our pay-as-you-go. So we borrow less for capital projects because we have a bit of a piggy bank. Finally, when it comes to salaries and benefits, it is very notable that in the space of 1 year, our salary and benefits envelope was reduced by 6.7%. In conclusion, therefore, again, in a year of COVID-19 and the cyber attack, we achieved the targets within our long-term financial plan. We eliminated the structural deficit and the requirement for interim government funding. We adapted to a changed environment in so many ways, be it COVID-19, be it cyber, be it climate change, and we have done so with a much smaller workforce. We continue to deliver the services that are needed by our community, and we have made significant improvements to our operations and our administration in the process. With everything that hit us in 2020, I think it's fair to characterize that growth, or the focus on growth, took a bit of a backseat to some of the more urgent situations that presented ourselves. But certainly in 2021, and you will see this in the next presentation, the saying that it's all about growth will return. Now, although it took a bit of a backseat, it certainly was not excluded in its entirety. And I would further suggest that because of the accomplishments in 2020, because of our sound financial picture, because now everyone can clearly see the potential of the city moving forward, that probably more than anything else we will do, will in fact spur the growth that we are looking for. Your worship, members of council, subject to your questions, and I will stop sharing my screen. Questions, comments, and then I'm simply looking for a response.
Okay, thank you very much, City Manager. That was an excellent overview. Councillor Merrithew, please kick us off.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, City Manager. Look, we accomplished a ton of things in 2020. It just makes me so enthusiastic for the future of the City of St. John. There's just just a lot to celebrate in that report, sir, and a lot to be thankful for. I'm proud of all the staff, inside, outside, senior and otherwise, and I'm proud of this council, by the way. And I just want to thank everyone involved. Thank you.
Okay, well said. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Reardon, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I would echo those thoughts. I'm extremely proud of those accomplishments. John, you've been great on the job leading us, and we've had a great council. We've worked together. We've worked hard. We've got a lot of hardworking staff, and I'm proud of everything that we've accomplished. I mean, some of it seemed impossible not that long ago, but we've managed to do it. So I want to thank you and your staff for the great work in this last couple of years. It's been more than a couple of years. We started all this a few years back, and we've just kept rolling, and we've really made some wonderful strides this last little bit. So appreciate all the work. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well said. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. When I look through this list, you know, the amount of cooperation that has taken place to get this stuff done is unbelievable. People have come together at a point in time where we really needed people to pull. And this is the result of so many people pulling in the same direction. So I just want to thank all my colleagues on council, especially staff and the city manager. It was 2020 wasn't a good year, but this is a good report, and this shows that we can do a lot no matter what's going on around us. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands. City manager, a couple of comments for me. I think I got this silly background on. Your first slide, I think, is incredibly powerful. And I think it's something to be built on, city manager, as we continue to work through, communicate with the public, and have them understand fully and appreciate fully. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, this slide is a very, very, very powerful slide. The routine daily operations of a $200 million structure. And then emergency operations, we hope we never have to test those, but we sure have, in the last couple of years. And then there's the new stuff. So, I think this presentation that you've given tonight, in the midst of everything that's come at us, is a testament to your team and the work that you've accomplished in 2020. And 2019, frankly, was the same. And 2018 was the same. And 2017 was the same. And, and I think I think this council should be very proud as well. The conversations have not been easy. I say all the time, I don't think I would have changed the conversations I've had. I may have changed some of the way I've said it, but this council has had really difficult conversations. It's talked about and focused on growth, where for the first time in decades we've turned the population decline around. We focused on and delivered on on our finances. We have financial policies, long-term financial plans. We've paid down debt. We have reserves, and we've defined and gotten a full commitment for comprehensive municipal reform. So I just say, city manager, a report like this, and somehow distilling this down into, hard to get that in a one-pager, but somehow getting it into a consumable for, the citizens. And then if you're watching this broadcast tonight and you're a candidate, you want to be a candidate for council, read this, understand the facts, because if you start talking about how we've added more debt than any other council ever, I'm gonna be fact checking you as a candidate too. So read the facts. Let's celebrate the great work that we as a collective, because it's citizens, it's staff, it's council, we all win together. It's employees recognizing that we all have to be part of the solution. This was an exceptional presentation tonight, City Manager. You and your senior leadership team, and I hope every single employee in the organization gets a copy of this and they're given 10 minutes to review it. And if they have any questions, they should ask their manager what it means if they have any questions. Really excited, excellent presentation. And I think your first slide is incredibly powerful. Thank you, City Manager. I thought I saw another hand. Did I see another hand? 1 second, sorry. Councillor Norton. You're muted, Councillor.
Apologies, Your Worship. I must have hit that by mistake, but I'll take the opportunity. Thank you to staff. Thank you to council for basically staying, in sync and listening to some of the pros that inform some of the decision making. And thank you to the citizens and the business and those stakeholders in the community that have lived through some challenging times and continue to invest in the community, whether they're volunteering, whether they're setting up business, whether they're buying residential homes, and all the things that they do in our community to allow the good work to continue. So thank you to them as well.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion for an enthusiastic receive and file? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Enthusiastic and Councillor Merrithew. Thank you. Great, and I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? That's a unanimous vote on an enthusiastic receive and file, City Manager. Thank you. Next item, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, 12.3 is the Work Plan 2021 introduction by the City Manager.
Excellent. Thank you, City Manager. Keep the momentum.
There's nothing I would like more than to be able to say at this point in time that we'll take a vacation in 2021 because of the work of 2020, but clearly that would not be in the best interest of anybody, most notably our community. So for the next few minutes, with the background of what we did achieve in 2020, I would like to highlight to council and by extension the community what we are looking at in terms of the work plan for 2021. I just showed this slide in the past presentation. It continues to hold true. Between routine daily operations and emergency operations that simply will not go away, our capacity to deal with new stuff is limited. And we have to keep that in mind as we work through the plan. Some of the key considerations between the plan. First of all, anytime you do as many major initiatives as we have done last year, if you read anything on corporate best practices, you should always have a consolidation period post major initiatives. And I think that's going to be important to consider within 2021. For example, we already have reduced the outside workers by some 32 personnel after tremendous work and commitment to our city. And that number is going to increase to 43. You don't remove 32 to 43 people from a workforce without having a period of time to adjust to the new structure, new roles, responsibilities, etc. Because if you don't make those adjustments, then you will never be as successful as you would want to be. I think we need to recognize, based on previous reports I've given to council, that because we are rebuilding our entire IT systems, we will have limited IT capability for the first half a year. That doesn't really affect our delivery of services per se, but it certainly affects our own internal processes and our ability to move forward on a number of different fronts. We do need to recognize, as the previous slide highlighted, that our routine operations must continue. We can't stop collecting garbage so that we can have more people to do something else. So there's always a question of balance. I will say that the staff, and thank you, council, for recognizing it, the staff has been working extremely hard for the past many years. And sooner or later, we have to be conscious of tempo. And one of my mentors always used to use the expression, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you do need to make sure that your staff continue to have the ability to address the demands that are placed on them. So we do need to be conscious of not, if you will, burning out our team in the process of trying to accomplish things. We also need to recognize this year that there is an upcoming municipal election. There is some modest impact before the election. And then, of course, there is a period of time after the election where the new council needs to get its feet under itself and be prepared to make the difficult decisions that will lie ahead. With that as preamble, I'd also like to simply highlight that this entire work plan has been based or nested within Council's priorities. They continue to be valid in our opinion, and in fact, Council did review them approximately a year ago to make sure that they were still comfortable with them, and certainly they have guided the deliberations within this plan. But also, what has guided this, because not everything is in those Council priorities, is the will of Council, as has been expressed in the various Council meetings, both through resolution and through the observations of various Council members. And that will of Council has, to a large degree, factored what is and is not within this work plan. I'd also like to highlight 5 phrases that have helped guide our deliberations. The first one, and it's back, it's all about growth. This city will only thrive and prosper if we get our growth rate up. And everything we do must be viewed through that lens. It's also about customer service excellence. And you've heard me speak before about facilitate over regulate. The public service has an absolute role to regulate. However, if they take that to its extreme, it's difficult to find workarounds. And therefore the mentality of facilitating a yes as opposed to regulating a no becomes incredibly important. Another common expression, and it takes several forms, but for now I'll say best value for money. And we, throughout this work plan, have focused on the notion of finding initiatives whereby we can improve the value for money, which I personally believe is already quite high. And my last one, under the notion of continuous improvement, we always need to work hard to always be better. So with that as the guiding principles, let's talk about Work Plan 21 and 22. First of all, the overriding consideration, if you will, the reality, there are too many initiatives to complete in any one year. We must prioritize them, and we must begin to take a multi-year approach to our work plans. We've already done that in terms of the EY implementation plan. It is a multi-year plan. We already do that for our capital plan, which is a multi-year plan. And we certainly need to do the same in terms of our work plan, because we don't stand a hope of dealing with all the initiatives, all of the will of Council within any given 1 year. Therefore, for this work plan, we are taking a 3-tiered approach. Tier 1, we are defining as major initiatives that have significant effort from the entire team, and we will aim to have those completed in 2021. Tier 2 are more functional area initiatives, and this is where you'll see the direct impact onto the community much more. And for Tier 2, we define it as to be commenced in 2021, but likely to extend to 2022. To be clear, in this tier, there are many initiatives that will be commenced in 2021 and will be complete in 2021. But there will be some out of necessity, out of capacity, that will extend into 2022. Tier 3 are the next level down. We will commence them in 2021 if time permits, but it's highly likely, in fact, almost definitively, they will not be completed until 2022. So with that as the 3 definitions, let's move on to the Tier 1s. What we are suggesting needs to be completed in 2021, and our major efforts cross-functional or for the entire staff. These, unlike the slides that follow, are actually in priority. The first is we need to complete the recovery from the cyber attack. That is ongoing. We are tracking well, but it will still take many months before the cyber attack in its entirety is in our rearview mirror. Next, we want to develop a performance measurement system. I could spend all evening on this, I won't, but we need to have clearly defined objectives, key performance indicators, and a system in place to not only collect the data, but to analyze the data, make conclusions, and make adjustments. Once we have that performance measurement system, we'll then be able to reinvent our continuous improvement framework and reinvent our personal evaluation framework. and all that we wish to achieve in this calendar year. We will, of course, continue our advocacy work to the province for the transformational reforms that are needed, most notably comprehensive property tax reform and regional cost sharing. We now know that the province is going to take on a larger provincial municipal reform, and we will, of course, engage in that. But the two nuts we need to try to crack are the comprehensive property tax reform and the regional cost sharing within that broader municipal reform. We need to recognize and accept that there will be new council orientation that will be undertaken. Our integrated customer service center has been co-located, but that's about it at this point. There are all sorts of other initiatives required in order for it to have its full operating capability, and that must occur in this calendar year. We have begun work on, and council has been briefed on, the notion of developing a 10-year strategic plan, and that must be complete this calendar year. We will continue our review of the agencies, boards, and commissions, and although we will not complete this work in its entirety, we should complete the review of some of the ABCs in their entirety. One thing we will most certainly complete in 2021 is to sort out the reporting requirements to council of all of the ABCs. We have committed to prior, and it will be done in 2021, to develop a 10-year labor relations strategy. When working with work groups and unions, you simply do not change everything overnight. It needs to be a progressive, iterative process, and we need a plan to achieve that. We have developed that plan verbally. We have not put pen to paper, nor have we yet sought council approval for that strategy, and that must, of course, occur. And finally, we need a lot of our software that we use in this city is well over 20 years old in terms of managing pay, controlling payments, managing stock levels, etc. We need a new ERP. You do not ever do that in 1 year, but in 2021, we'll at least complete the needs analysis for what we need in terms of our new ERP. That is the workload in terms of major initiatives, the tier ones. Now into the tier twos. These will start in 2021. Some will be completed in 2021, and others will be completed in 2022. There are 3 pages of initiatives. I will not go through all of them, but these are the initiatives where you start to see the benefits to the community. Everything in tier 1 will benefit the corporation, make the corporation more efficient, make the corporation more effective. In tier 2, you start to see the tangible ones to the community. We will continue to move along the regional economic development by developing a strategic plan and feeding into the new agency, and that should dramatically improve growth within the city. We now have the recommendations from the Succeed and Stay program, and we need to execute those recommendations. We will continue with our economic and community recovery programming, those ideas that will help us recover post-COVID-19. We need a long-term plan for the city market and a vision for that market. We are going to develop some sort of affordable housing action plan. Affordable housing is not solely the responsibility of the city, far from it, but we certainly have a leadership role that we can play, and we hope to exercise that. We will implement a new solid waste management system. It will include curbside recycling. It will include the helping hands that Councillor Sullivan spoke about this evening, and of course the plastic bag bylaw. And we have a number of procedural bylaw and governance issues to address, and they are shown here. I won't go through each of them, but basically everything on this page will start in 2021 and for the most part will be completed in 2021. Solid waste management will extend into 2022. Of note, under the governance, the review of the committee structure includes the incorporation of the Public Safety Committee that was identified by Council as a requirement some time ago. Turning to page 2. Asset management is an internal process that I won't bore anybody with. We do need to update our long-term financial plan. Fundy Key, our major catalytic project, will actually start to see construction in terms of raising the seawall in this calendar year. We will continue to work on our other two catalytic infrastructure projects, the Learning Commons, more generally known as the new school on the peninsula, and the Ashburn Interchange. We have learned a lot through all of our emergency responses of the last 3-4 years, and therefore we will create a new municipal emergency response plan. I've gone on record before saying this, I'll say it again with my background, that this community is very well served by its emergency management organization. But again, everybody can get better, so we will develop a new and improved municipal emergency response plan. We are going to have a fantastic simulation project, theater project, which we can use to train our own people, but also farm it out and train others. We will complete the fire services review that we've spoken about before. We will explore opportunities for regional collaboration because we will have that simulation theater, and we also have a very good training grounds as well. And finally, as we've discussed this evening, we will explore the rideshare opportunities within the community. That was my wording before the motion this evening. Obviously, that now gets tightened up to deliver on a bylaw third reading by the end of 2021. Page 3, strategic communication plan. Again, that's an internal process, as is developed contract management. Long-term financial plan I've already spoken about. A new website is coming out in February. We need to develop a subsidization policy. What do we subsidize in this city? What do we not subsidize in this city, and why? We have to launch our internal audit capability that I've spoken about. We have, despite our successes in collective bargaining in 2020, we still have some outstanding contracts that need to be addressed in 2021. And because police and fire are two of those contracts, there is the potential of having to go to binding arbitration for those. We need to do a job evaluation review because of all the changes we've done to our structure. I believe we need to find a better way to recognize our employees' contributions. So those are all of the tier 2. Turning to tier 3, there's one slide of these, and I'm just going to build the slide. In the interest of time, I will not speak to all of these, but there are some interesting points in here that have consumed a fair amount of discussion within council, such as an arena strategy moving forward, such as implementing some short-term initiatives within Move SJ, and that includes the Main Street North Corridor and other aspects that various parts of our organization will find interesting, including developing an overall vision for the waterfront with the port. So in conclusion, it is a very ambitious work plan. There's a bit of a balance between consolidating some of our gains from 2020 and introducing the new ideas. Clearly, we still don't know what's left in front of us in terms of COVID-19, so we may need to make adjustments throughout the year because of the pandemic. We may need to make adjustments to this plan after the municipal election. Once there is a new council in place, they will develop their council priorities, and that may necessitate some adjustments. That said, the staff is confident that this work plan satisfies the needs of our city in a prioritized approach. We'll get to what's important first, and we'll deal with the rest as we move forward. My final point is perhaps the most important on this conclusion slide. The plate is full. As I said, it's a very ambitious work plan. In fact, I think to a degree, it may be a bit overly ambitious, but it certainly cannot take on any more. So as we move forward from here, if there are additional items for the work plan, the approach I will need to take as your city manager is if there's something new that comes on, then we will have to have a discussion about what comes off, because we are without doubt at capacity. Your worship, subject to comments, questions, I'm simply looking again for a receive and file.
Okay, thank you very much, City Manager. We'll go to a couple of comments and questions. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to the City Manager as well for the work plan. I certainly, in looking at it and in comparing that with the vision I think I have for a progressive, forward-thinking, always moving city. I think this is really representative of it, and I think that's what makes me really excited about the plan as well, and excited to be a part of it and help propel it. I do have a couple questions, though, City Manager, perhaps just if you could elaborate a bit on it. The Central Peninsula Plan, the implementation, I think it's listed in Tier 3. Could you just talk a bit about that? I mean, we spent a huge amount of time developing this plan, prioritizing this plan. I just worry it's becoming one of those scenarios where we put all this time into a plan and then, you know, it ends up on the shelf for too long. Could you just comment on that?
Yeah, Your Worship, through you to the councillor. I do not share your concern. The reason it's Tier 3 is because the implementation of the Central Neighborhood Plan is a multi-year plan. It will not be completed in 2021. It will be something that will happen over a series of years. So the implementation, the action plan will be developed this year. We will start to action those items, but because it's going over a series of years, that's why it's been put in Tier 3, to not give anybody the illusion that we will have acted on everything within that plan in 2021.
Is it another way to say it, just to, Councillor, sorry to jump in, is it another way to say it, because it's a great question, David, or Councillor Hickey, sorry. Is it another way to say it, City Manager, that that the plan is there, the plan will guide if somebody wants to come and build a new building, if somebody wants to do a new project, that plan is going to be opened up to see how it fits into the plan. And so there it will be the guiding document that moves us forward. Is that?
Absolutely. But in addition to that, not only is it the guiding document, there are actually some concrete action plans required within that overall strategy. And that's what we need to start working on.
Sorry,
right, and I guess that's what I was alluding to. I think all of the time since it was since we first passed the plan, I think staff has used it as a lens and used it in all of the thought we've put into any development in the Central Peninsula, and I think that's been really positive, and I think it shows the strength of the plan as well. Just one more question quickly, City Manager, if I can. I was hoping in the solid waste management to see something alluding to flyer delivery as well. Any insight on that, or because certainly it was passed by council in 2019, and that's kind of where we're at. I was hoping to see some mention of it.
Right. Point taken, Councillor. It didn't make the grade in terms of the PowerPoint slides, but the PowerPoint slides are just a summary of the work plan. Yes, we do have that outstanding motion from council, and I don't see any reason why we can't be addressing that in 2021.
Excellent. No, I think it's just given the will of council, I think it's a great addition to in the air of the same effort as the plastic bag ban as well, and certainly does add up to savings in us paying tipping fees too in our waste management. So that's all for me, but sincerely very excited about the plan and excited about I think the vision that it provides us over the next year or so. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I don't see any. Councillor McKenzie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So getting feedback. The plan is City Manager. I think it's a very ambitious to-do list. I see that the flexibility in it because I see in Tier 3 you have short-term initiatives with Move SJ for Main Street North, and I know there's private investors wanting to do stuff on Main Street, so that might change going forward. But I think it's overall it's very very strategic, and it's very in depth, I guess. Well, I fully support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the City Manager. I think it's a great plan, and you know what all these reports do? It's good for the community to know what direction the city wants to go in. So I think in all your reports tonight, City Manager, you do give the input into the citizens, and I think they appreciate it, because I've often heard in the past months that when you give your report, on the city manager's update, which you do on a regular basis. Sometimes we don't ask any questions on that, but it is well received in the community. They really like that. On this plan, everybody's going to be working very hard, but I just had a couple little things like on waste management. We are, I think, scheduled still to do the pilot project this spring, or maybe a little later. That would be one of my questions. And the other one, I think, was already answered because I noticed that on a third tier, you had the arena strategy. And I think if somebody came forth with a great idea on either buying or taking over one of the arenas, that you probably would look at that sooner than later. I just wanted to know your thoughts on both of those ideas.
So yes, we still plan on doing the trial on curbside recycling sometime this spring. That will be guided to a degree by what phase of COVID we are in through the spring timeframe, but that's certainly our intention. On the arena strategy, we'll see how this plays out in terms of capacity, et cetera, because there is, again, a public consultation part to this. But more importantly, the arena strategy, I believe, needs to fit in within the 10-year strategic plan. Within the 10-year strategic plan, we need to be talking about what we want the city to look like 10 years from now. The reality is our parks, recreation, and recreational facilities will be a key part of that discussion. So we do need to nail down the 10-year strategy that talks about parks and recreation before, in my opinion, we actually nail down the arena strategy. Now, they don't need to work sequentially. They can work at the same time, but we need the strategy for the 10 years before we decide just on one thing, which is the arenas of a larger parks and recreation situation that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I appreciate that, and thanks again for all the work, and thanks to all the staff, because I know some of our people work extremely hard, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank you as well, John, for that 21 plan. I find it's great for councillors because it's prioritized, it's strategic, and going forward, we know where we are going. We can communicate that to the citizens. We have the plan. We know what's up at bat first. We know what will follow later. So I find for me as a councillor, it's a great tool to have as well. And to have that plan, I think, demonstrates that going forward, we know the road that we're on, and we understand the things that we need to do to get us to where we want to go. So, I think it's great. So really appreciate it and love the tier system with it as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Anyone else? Okay, just a couple of comments then for me. Thanks again, City Manager. I just did a quick count. It's 8:51 at night, and you have 14 of your staff on the council meeting with us tonight from various disciplines, the clerk's office, our commissioners, your senior leadership team, our commissioners of finance, yourself. And I think the more we have conversations like this, the better the public will understand this organization, because I don't think they understand it very well. So I'm really pleased to see you do presentations like this. I don't know of a municipality. I'm going to say something here that folks will try to prove me wrong perhaps, but I think the amount of change that this organization has gone through in the last few years in particular is monumental. This council has driven a growth-focused, fiscally restrained, and reform-focused agenda since it became council in 2016, certainly since I became mayor. And that work doesn't happen without, your team, a city manager. So I think this is a aggressive work plan, frankly. I'm sorry for what I'm about to say. There's 244 working days left in the year. I counted while you were doing your presentation. So there's a lot of work to get done in 244 working days. And I think it's the discipline to stay focused. And you're going to be tested. We test you all the time. We all fall victim to it, that it's like, chasing the newest thing today. And, my old boss, our CEO, would say, tell me what you're going to do in your work plan. And then he would say, now articulate or tell me out loud what you're not going to do, because I don't want you to bring it up again. And it's going to be the discipline, city manager, of your council to support you in the work plan. And you're going to have to remind us over and over and over again. And again, I would encourage any council, anybody that wants to be on council, you've got 2 reports tonight. Read every line of it, because it really sets a very clear focus of continued prosperity up for this city. And it falls into the buckets: city manager, growth, fiscal, and those provincial reforms, which are the game changers. We're going to need our local ministers to fight for us like they've never fought for us before, because we've laid out a very prosperous path towards a very bright future for the whole region of St. John. So I think it's an excellent presentation, city manager, and I'm looking forward to seeing the pieces of the puzzle continue. And there will have to be pivots and changes, and you're going to have to remind us that some things are going to have to move around a little bit in our last few months, and then the new council will take over here in May. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight. Another enthusiastic receive and file. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you for that. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Great. And anyone contrary minded? Okay, thanks. That's a great presentation. Thank you to you, City Manager, and to your whole team. Okay, next item, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, 12.4, we have the Economic and Community Recovery Program on-street parking subsidy pilot program.
Okay, and City Manager, you told me who I was referring that to, and I have forgotten. That was going to Ms. Hamilton. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Before you this evening is a recommendation to launch a one-time pilot program to implement a temporary on-street parking subsidy. This initiative supports the city's economic and community recovery efforts, which are really aimed at supporting local businesses in response to the public health pandemic. Just as a bit of background, the program proposal was presented and endorsed by the city's growth committee. Follow-up engagement was held with Uptown St. John and the city's parking commission, and it has yielded the partnership approach that's before you this evening. With that introduction, I will turn things over to David Dobbelstein, the city's manager of growth, and Nancy Tissington, executive director of Uptown St. John, who will both present the details of the program and the recommendations before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
See the screen?
Yourself up a bit.
Speak loudly.
There you go.
Okay. So as Ms. Hamilton alluded to, this was a proposal that went to Growth Committee about 2 weeks ago. And what I would call this is a qualified recommendation, because the motion has changed just a little bit since that time. As council is well aware, winter was a particularly difficult time for small businesses in general. And this year in particular, due to COVID-19, that's been exacerbated significantly. What we're hearing from various sources, including the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, there's a risk of up to 19% of business closures this year. We could see some of those happening during the winter time. So there's additional hardship that's faced, and in particular, the tourism and accommodation sector and food services sectors have been particularly hard hit across Canada. They still have almost a quarter of the workforce laid off entirely. So this is no different in St. John. And this past summer, where we saw record lows of tourism, which is usually the period of time when these businesses sort of store up reserves to make it through winter, well, those aren't available. So there are some subsidy programs available from the federal government, but we are seeing across Canada and in St. John significant declines of pedestrian counts in business districts. So in our uptown, we've seen 50% decrease in people walking around, and that has a significant impact on our local businesses. Even think about if you're a restaurant and you're used to having a lot of folks for lunch, and local businesses are having their staff work remotely, which is a safe thing to do, but it means that those businesses are struggling even more. So what we have before you is a proposal to offer 1 hour of free parking daily during the week for on-street parking. We would intend to fund this through the Municipal Economic and Community Recovery Program, which Council instituted last May. For short, we call this the Encore program. And this program would be offered through the Hotspot app. So everybody who downloads the Hotspot app would be eligible for an hour of free parking daily. Would come up as soon as they go to park. They would all see that they have 1 hour free that they can use, and they can use it whenever they like. So the goal of the program would be to increase the amount of patrons visiting our businesses over the winter months. So we would be able to validate and verify this by the amount of users using Hotspot. We would hope to see an increase in the amount of users using Hotspot, which would then have a spillover effect. If it's easier to park in the future, we anticipate further good things happening as a result of this program. We would see people finding an easier time coming uptown in particular. And the reason we're choosing uptown is one, Hotspot is available uptown, but two, sometimes we've heard from businesses that they fear their customers aren't coming uptown because of the paid parking. And so we want to do a pilot. Again, this is just a simple pilot. We're not envisioning that this would be a permanent change. This is strictly temporary, and it's to try to alleviate some of those concerns and to really drive business to our core. So as Ms. Hamilton alluded to, what we discussed in Growth Committee was just allowing the city to run the program in general with the Parking Commission. And then we received direction from Growth Committee to seek additional partnerships. And we're pleased to say that we've been successful in that. We've approached Uptown St. John just last week, and we've sort of worked out the details with them. We believe that this program would cost $35,000, so a little over $3,000 per week, which 85% of those costs would be towards the free parking subsidy. We estimate about 15% would be for actually marketing the program, because the last thing we want to do is have a program that nobody uses. So with those costs, they'd be reimbursed through this Growth Reserve Fund. We would anticipate that the program would run through the winter, and it would end March 31st, or until the pool of funds designated for the program is exhausted. So whichever comes first. We anticipate approximately $30,000 will be returned to the city as parking revenue. And before I go any further, I'd like to invite Nancy Dissington, the Executive Director of Uptown St. John, just to share a little bit with you her experience of running similar programs and what they can bring to the table as part of this proposal. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and invite Ms. Dissington to present.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. Well, thank you so much for having the confidence in local BIA to help out with this partnership. We actually started this tool that's in our marketing kit back in February 2015. I don't know if you all remember the snowmageddon that we had. And we actually went into a state of emergency. And to get people to come back uptown and to actually have them and the businesses feel supported by the local BIA, which is one of our many pillars, was to work with Hotspot Parking, which was fairly new to our city. But come to find out, their infrastructure is very intelligent. It will share with us the outcomes of this program. It will tell us on a daily basis if we need to know how many people are utilizing this, how many people are uploading the app to take advantage of the 1 hour parking. From then, we've used it for things like Black Friday, Valentine's Day, the Uptown Sparkles, and we also recently have done it this past summer for the entire month of June. We did see a bit of an uptake on all of those, so we do feel it is a tool in our toolkit that would be great. It will bolster our local economy, although consumer behavior is a bit of odds these days because of the pandemic. But we do believe that this gift from the city and sponsorship with us and the fact that we have done this several times is basically a really good thing to do for our local businesses. We did ask for this last spring. We did feel that this would be a really good initiative for the city, and I'm really I'm really pleased that the Growth Committee that has endorsed this, and we're happy to help and partner in anything further that would help our business community at this time. As was said earlier with David, there has been quite a struggle here, and January, February, March is typically a hard time of the year. It's even more so now. One of the things is we're pretty excited the fact that Orange is coming back, and we would probably turn this around between 5 and 7 days to get this out. We would be doing print, radio, social media, and we have a large social media following, and working with the communications department with the City of St. John as well. So we're excited about launching this out and giving a little bit of hope to our local businesses. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Nancy. So just a couple of final points. We would not be running the program if the St. John Health Region is in red or lockdown. So we are pleased to see that we're coming back to orange here shortly. So as Nancy alluded to, we'll be rolling out the program here shortly if approved by council. We've also put in some other terms and conditions that we feel will protect taxpayers, but also provide the nimbleness that might be needed to adjust the program as is needed. We've also consulted with the new Regional Economic Development Agency and the Chamber, who've also both committed to market the program to their stakeholders. And we're confident that we have sort of a winning formula here between the city and Uptown St. John, and this is a real opportunity to try to drive some traffic to our struggling businesses. So with that, I will turn the questions back over to you, Your Worship.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Does somebody like to move the recommendation? So Deputy, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. Okay, any questions, comments? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. And I see you, David. Councillor McKenzie, you start us off, and then. Yep.
Thank you, Worship. Well, David and Nancy, I was probably one of the ones that reluctantly put this forward from Growth. My own personal view is the proof will be in the pudding. I didn't realize that Hotspot was going to give us a report on how well this program does at the end of the day, and maybe maybe that'll change my thinking. I'll support it, and I hope it works. I have my doubts, but I'm hoping that it will work, and be interested in seeing that report from Hotspot. Maybe it'll be good for future endeavors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey. I see Deputy Councillor Hickey. Feel like an auctioneer. Councillor. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Start bidding on chances.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks very much, David and Nancy. I wanted to thank you both. It was a great presentation. Certainly, it was brought forward to Growth Committee for the folks at home, and at Growth Committee, it kind of took a bit of a different shape, and that's kind of how I think we got here in our conversation around bringing in Uptown St. John to it, because I think, Nancy, of your history with the program. Because of your experience with programs like these, I think it's a really positive cooperation between the BIA and the city. And I know certainly Councillor McKenzie expressed some of his concerns with it, but I would counter in saying you've proven yourself, right? This is not a new program. This is something that you guys have done, and it's worked, and it's promoted the Uptown, and it's kept the Uptown vibrant and folks engaged in it. And I think, especially with the number of users of things like the Hotspot app, I think it's all the more positive, because it encourages that use and encourages folks to visit the Uptown and come to the Uptown, and that's been proven in the numbers where when you see the increases and the increases in the parking, and as well as the increases in the use of the free hours. So I think it's really positive. I think it's a great step. I'm glad to see you guys managing it, and I thank staff for their effort here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I say congratulations to both of you. I hope it works, and I hope people come uptown to shop and eat in the restaurants once they're all back to open. I did want to ask a question, like in the winter, I know it's a little bit difficult, not as many people travel around, and this year in particular, it's that case. So if we don't use all the money by the end of March, are you going to ask for an extension? Because April is a good month to have good things happening in the city too. So I mean, you got an X number of dollars, $35,000, So we might have some left over at the end of March. I see the city manager's ready to answer.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I am. As the keeper of the keys overall in terms of the budget for the year with the CFO, absolutely. We'll be coming back to Growth Committee with an update as to how this is going and whether there is potential to extend it or not. I do feel obliged to make 2 points. The first one is this is not the beginning of the slippery slope to free parking in the Uptown. We have to charge for parking in our Uptown core in order to deliver the other services. It is a key part of our budget. So I do feel obliged to stress that from a staff point of view, there's no intention of making this permanent. It has to be within a budget. That's point one. But the second point that I've heard quite often as we've developed this is why just the Uptown? There's 2 points I'd like to highlight. First of all, the Uptown is the only place that has paid parking, metered parking. Elsewhere where you shop, there are free parking lots. But when we talk about marketing, we are encouraging all the people that we are working with on this to broaden the marketing campaign to not just shop Uptown, but shop local. And then that will expand this program to benefit everyone within our community. But the only people who pay for parking to go shopping are those who come to the Uptown core, and that's why it's focused there. But yes, we will return to Growth Committee with recommendations should there be money left over.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see. Good luck.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, City Manager. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. As everyone knows, I sit on Uptown St. John with Nancy, and so we've done this program previously. Nancy's chosen some strategic days, like maybe Valentine's Day or whatever, and Uptown would support that through the Business Improvement Fund. So it's worked very well. And the other interesting thing is that there's so much data that comes out of that. It can show you the movement of vehicles in the Uptown, where people are parking, spots that aren't being used. You can drive vehicles to those spots. There's so much data you can get from it. You guys are going to love it. So thanks for bringing it forward.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Just a couple of comments for me. First of all, I'm really pleased to see Nancy, Uptown St. John involved. I mean, we did have that discussion at Growth. I knew you had already laid the groundwork for it. I had a boss one time, and it's a little bit perhaps counter to how a lot of people think, but he would ask me, how many complaints did we get today? And he wanted to know how many people, and his point was, because if nobody complained, would you rather they complain to you or not give you that opportunity to do better? And I'm not characterizing what I'm about to say, but I do want to mention somebody who is he sends us emails. He's outspoken, in particular about parking. But I just want to give Herb Duncan a little bit of a shout out, because Herb sent us all a note. I speak to Herb often. Herb sent a note. I went upstairs to see the city manager and said, boy, it's an unprecedented year. What could we maybe do around parking? And sort of here we are. And I know, Herb is very passionate, and he sends big long notes, and Herb has been very passionate about parking. So I hope you're watching tonight, Herb, that you send a note. This is a trial that we're going to see if we can support those local small businesses. So thanks. So you could characterize Herb's notes as complaints. I like them. We don't always agree, but he does poke, and he pushes, and he wants a better St. John, just like the rest of us. I'd also ask that folks use these spots. Like, if you have a parking spot somewhere, use your parking spot. Leave every dollar for somebody that's going to go to one of those small businesses or restaurants and buy something, so that we can stretch that money as far as we can. Lastly, Mr. Dion, I see you're on the call here. Thank you. Could we also, because we talked about this as well at Growth, could we just remind people there are thousands of parking spaces in the Uptown, As you know, there's just 2 blocks away on Water Street, and just remind people once again that this is where you can park for free. After 6 o'clock, you can park for free. Just remind people there's lots and lots and lots of places to park, and I think it'd be really helpful if Mark, if you would work with Nancy and just put a simple something together that people can just remind themselves that there's lots of places to park if you're coming up for more than that 1 hour. So I'm pretty excited. I'm really glad to see council supporting, hopefully, an initiative to support those businesses, those entrepreneurs who have had unprecedented challenge in 2020/2021. So. Okay, perfect. Thank you. The recommendation is on the table then, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Okay, not seeing anyone. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. And we tried to keep you on the line, Nancy, till 10 o'clock, but we got you out early. Okay. Thank you very much, David and Nancy and Ms. Hamilton and everybody else. Thank you, and City Manager. Okay, next item, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, item 12.5 is a staff report entitled Fundy Winterfest.
Ms. Hamilton, over to you.
Yes, Your Worship. Members of Council, staff are pleased to provide an update this evening on an innovative approach to Fundy Winterfest, which is a long-standing recreation program that's been delivered in partnership with our region, really intended to promote wellness during the winter season. Emily Murphy on our community services team is available this evening to brief council on these plans that will be rolling out in the coming weeks. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Just a quick minute to give you an update on Winterfest, and as many of you know, it's a long-standing partnership between municipalities in the Greater St. John area. So Grand Bay, St. John, Quispamsis, Rothesay all get together, and typically each municipality would own a certain weekend and host events. This year it's a bit different. Our intent is to spread Winterfest out over the entire month of February. And we've come up with some self-guided activities to promote physical and mental health, but also that people can do within their own bubbles. So it's not contingent on whichever phase we're in, because we won't be actually providing one event where we're asking people to come and attend on that day. We're actually quite fortunate to have so many beautiful spaces locally to explore and enjoy winter activities. So we're going to capitalize on that this year. We've got an app going that has sort of made a game out of discovering different hidden gems within the city. We're going to highlight local businesses and what they're offering in terms of winter specials. And we have sort of photo contests and other fun things that people can sort of share what they love about winter and how they're spending their what activities they're doing. So we're pivoting, we're doing things in a new way, and I actually feel like this has the potential to be one of our most successful years. People are looking for things to do outside, and we've got lots to offer. So we have a Facebook page and Instagram up and running, and we're also working with our communications department to promote. Starts next week, and it'll run the entire month of February. Over to you, Your Worship.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, so really glad. Thank you very much for all your work, pivoting once again, innovating in a year where we can't gather down at Market Square and have the big kickoff. So, but really, really excited. I think, it's been interesting in 2020, 2021, fitness equipment sold out, bicycle shops sold out. Like, people have, I think, fallen back in love with those recreational assets that we have. And so I'm really glad to see all this work that you've done. I'll try to find it and send it to council. There was a TikTok video last night of that I saw, and it was a couple that had moved here from Toronto and did this amazing video of when we arrived. It was cold, and but here's all the great things we did all around St. John, and Bay of Fundy and golfing and all this kind of stuff. So I think we've got the makings here of a lot of opportunity in the future as well. So thanks so much for your work. Any questions, council? Okay, so just to receive and file. I think, yeah, thank you. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Merrithew, thank you. On the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily, for all your work. Okay, see you. Clerk, next item.
Yes, Your Worship. Next item is 15.1 on the agenda, and it's a letter from M. Buckley with respect to support UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons. There's a recommendation to receive this for information.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Move, sorry, seconded by, Councillor Merrithew. Okay, thank you. Okay, okay, sorry, I got to see a couple of hands up. Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Your Worship. Look, I know it's fairly standard for us to get letters and we receive them for information. These ones, you know, I realize they're asking for things that aren't in our control. And I know the world is a much more complicated place than simply saying we need to get rid of nuclear weapons and they go. But I think on a statement of principle, I don't think receiving for information is appropriate in this case. I would like to see a motion where we say that on principle, the city of St. John does believe in the abolition of nuclear weapons worldwide. So that's my thought.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of other hands. Think Councillor Reardon, did you have your hand up?
Yes, and I would have to agree. I would like to, on principle, I guess, go with that, or at least refer to the city manager if we don't want to do that. I don't want to just receive and file it myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. I totally agree. I think that this is a letter that needs to be actioned, and I would definitely support sending a letter from council saying that, you know, we would agree that the abolition of nuclear weapons, it's time to get rid of them. Thank you.
So sorry, council. So the motion then would be, so we have the motion on the floor to receive and file, so we can deal with that here, and then there's some discussion of I guess basically writing the federal government to encourage anyway. So we have a motion on the floor, and then we'll hear from our city manager, and then we can propose a second motion, I suppose. Just 1 second, Deputy, please. City manager.
Your Worship, after you deal with the motion that's already on the floor, if this council wishes to do anything more concrete than receive for information, I would personally suggest a referral to the city manager. You know, a motion without any discussion or debate does not have as much weight as actually having an opportunity to expose the issue, discuss the issue, and then pass an appropriate motion. We could at some point, certainly in this term of council, figure out an agenda or a council meeting where perhaps we have a bit of time to enter into that discourse and debate and then pass an appropriate motion. And we could take that on to program that sometime between now and the municipal elections.
Okay, thank you. So we had a receive and file. Are the movers prepared to refer that to the city manager, as he just said? Are you okay with that, Deputy? Sorry, your mic is muted. You're muted, Deputy. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Your Worship, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'll change my motion, you know, from receive and file. I wasn't sure that who we would contact to, you know, make our views known on this. So if it's referred to the city manager and he comes back and says, fine, we can send a letter to the federal government, then that's fine. So okay. I have no problem with referring it to the city manager.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Merrithew, you had seconded that. Are you okay with that? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, the letter references Mayors for Peace, which I'm looking at here. So that'll give our city manager some time to look at this and come back to us before this term of council is complete. Okay, thank you. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Okay, not seeing any. The motion's carried. Thank you. And I would propose the next item, Common Clerk, and can we just, so that's basically the same topic. Common Clerk, next item.
Yep. Yes, Your Worship, a very similar letter, 15.2, with respect to support UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons. So council could refer this as well, the 2 letters to the city manager.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Deputy, sorry, Councillor Reardon, Councillor McKenzie, thank you. Same referral motion to the city manager to be brought back for this term before this term ends. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next item.
And there are 2 items left, Your Worship, from Committee of the Whole. And the first one would be item 17.1. And this was a recommendation with respect to the option to lease agreement. And the resolution would be resolved that is recommended by Committee of the Whole, having met on January 25th, 2021, that amendment number 4 to the option to lease agreement entered into on December 19th, 2019 between the city and Fundy Key Developments, Inc. be approved, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute said amendment.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, second by Councillor Reardon. Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Thank you. The motion is carried. Next item.
And the final item is 17.2, and it's with respect to interim funding for Regional Economic Development Agency of Greater St. John. And the motion would read, resolved that is recommended by Committee of the Whole, having met on January 25th, 2021, Council approved the payment agreement between the city and new Regional Economic Development Agency for Greater St. John for services to be delivered during the month of February in the form attached as Schedule A. And further, that mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the said agreement.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Thanks for that. Okay, on the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone. Thank you very much. I tried my best, Councillor Sullivan, to get us past 10 o'clock, but we'll have to stop at 9:24. All right, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our staff. A lot of items, a lot of very important items discussed tonight. A very bright future laid down for our work plan. A lot of very focused work for 2021. And thank you all for your attention, and for those that are watching at home, thank you very much as well. So motion to adjourn, please. Thank you, Councillor Merrithew. Councillor Sullivan, thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Take care and stay safe and follow your public health directives. Thank you, folks. Take care.